At my wife Vanessa's ultrasound, the doctor started shaking uncontrollably. His face turned the color of ash as he stared at the monitor. He suddenly dropped the probe, grabbed my arm with a grip that bruised, and pulled me into the corner of the room while my wife was still lying on the table. He whispered, "You need to leave now. Get a divorce immediately." I asked him why, my heart pounding in my chest. He replied, "No time to explain. You will understand when you see this." He shoved a file into my hands. What I saw inside made my blood boil and turned my entire world into a living nightmare. My name is Isaiah Jefferson, but everyone calls me Ike. I am 74 years old, and for the last 10 years I thought I was the luckiest man in Chicago. I spent 40 years building a logistics empire from a single rusty truck into a fleet that crosses every state line in this country. I made my millions in silence. I have $18 million tucked away in trusts and offshore accounts, but looking at me, you would never know it. I drive a 5-year-old Ford pickup. I wear comfortable slacks and flannel shirts. I live in a nice house, but nothing that screams money. I learned a long time ago that wealth draws parasites, and at my age, I just wanted peace. That is why I thought Vanessa was different. She is 42, beautiful, vibrant, and she looked at me like I was the only man in the room. When she told me 3 months ago that she was pregnant, I wept. At 74, I thought my legacy was done. My first son, Trey, from my previous marriage, is 45 years old and a disappointment I have learned to live with. He is weak, easily led, and drowning in debt. But this new baby, this miracle with Vanessa, was going to be my second chance to get it right. I was going to be a father again. I was ready to rewrite my will to secure this child's future, to give them the world. We were at the clinic for the first trimester scan. The room smelled of antiseptic and lavender. Vanessa was lying on the examination table, her hospital gown pulled up to reveal her slightly rounded belly. She looked radiant. She was humming a lullaby, rubbing her stomach with a smile that could light up the city. I stood beside her, holding her hand, feeling like a king. I squeezed her fingers and she squeezed back. "I love you, Ike," she said softly. "This is our blessing, our little miracle." Dr. Aris entered the room. He has been my doctor for 20 years. He is a good man, a family man, someone I trust with my life. He greeted us with a smile, but I noticed he looked tired. He sat down at the ultrasound machine and squirted the cold blue gel onto Vanessa's stomach. She giggled. "It feels cold," she said playfully. "Just show us our baby doctor." Dr. Aris placed the transducer wand on her skin. He moved it around, searching for the heartbeat, searching for the image of my future. I leaned in, squinting at the gray and black static on the screen, waiting to see that little bean shape that would change everything. But the image did not clear. Dr. Aris stopped moving his hand. He stared at the screen. Then he adjusted his glasses and stared harder. I saw a drop of sweat roll down his temple, which was strange because the room was freezing. His smile vanished. He moved the wand again, pressing harder this time, moving it left, then right, then down. His hand started to tremble. It was subtle at first, just a little vibration, but then it became violent. The wand rattled against the plastic casing of the machine. "Is something wrong?" Vanessa asked, her voice laced with sudden panic. "Is the baby okay? Can you see the heartbeat?" Dr. Aris did not answer her. He pulled the wand away from her skin abruptly. He stood up his chair, scraping loudly against the floor tile. He looked at Vanessa, then at me, and his eyes were filled with a terror I had never seen in a medical professional. "The machine is malfunctioning," Dr. Aris stammered. "The resolution is not clear. Vanessa, your bladder is not full enough. That is the problem. To get a clear image at this stage, the bladder needs to be completely full to push the uterus up." Vanessa frowned. "But I drank a liter of water before we came," she argued. "It is not enough." Dr. Aris snapped, his voice uncharacteristically sharp. "Please, nurse, take Mrs. Jefferson to the waiting room. Have her drink 2 more large cups of water and walk around for 15 minutes. We need to clear this up." Vanessa looked at me, pouting. "Ike, tell him. I do not want to go out there." "Baby, just do what the doctor says," I soothed her, though a knot of unease was tightening in my stomach. "We want the best picture, right? Go drink the water. I will wait right here." Vanessa sighed, dramatically wiped the gel off her stomach with a paper towel, and followed the nurse out of the room. As soon as the heavy door clicked shut, the atmosphere in the room shifted instantly. It went from a medical examination to an interrogation room. Dr. Aris did not wait a second. He walked over to the door and turned the lock. The click echoed in the silence. Then he rushed over to me, grabbed me by the shoulders, and dragged me into the corner of the room, away from the door, away from the vents, as if he was afraid someone was listening. Ike listened to me very carefully. He whispered, his breath coming in short gasps. "You are in danger. You need to get out of that house." "What are you talking about, Aris?" I asked, pulling away from him. "You are scaring me. What is wrong with the baby? Is it a miscarriage? Just tell me the truth." "There is no baby," Ike, Dr. Aris hissed. "There never was a baby. There never could be a baby." I stared at him, my brain refusing to process the words. He sounded insane. I looked at Vanessa's belly every morning. I saw her morning sickness. I watched her cravings for pickles and ice cream. I felt her stomach growing. "You are crazy," I said, my voice rising. "I see her belly. She is pregnant. She has the symptoms. She is injecting hormones to mimic the symptoms and trick you." Dr. Aris interrupted, his eyes wide and desperate. "And the belly. It is padding or fluid retention from the drugs. Ike, look at this." He rushed to his computer and pulled up a file. It was not from his clinic. It was a digital transfer from a hospital in Ohio. He pointed a shaking finger at the screen. "I ran a background medical check on her files from her previous state because I wanted to be thorough with a high-risk pregnancy at her age," he explained rapidly. "This file came in 5 minutes before you walked into the room. Look at the date, 5 years ago." I leaned in, putting on my reading glasses. I saw Vanessa's name, I saw her date of birth, and then I saw the procedure code and the surgeon's notes. Total abdominal hysterectomy. I read it again. Total abdominal hysterectomy. Removal of the uterus and cervix. I felt the blood drain from my face. My knees buckled and I had to grab the edge of the desk to keep from hitting the floor. A hysterectomy. She had no womb. It was physically, medically, scientifically impossible for her to be carrying a child. But why? I whispered, my voice sounding like it belonged to a stranger. Why would she lie about this? Why would she fake a pregnancy for 3 months? Dr. Aris grabbed my arm again, squeezing tight. "Think, Ike. Think about what she has been asking you for lately. Think about the timing." The realization hit me like a physical blow to the gut. The will. Ever since she announced the pregnancy, Vanessa had been relentless about the will. She told me we needed to update it. She said we needed to protect the baby's future. Just yesterday, she brought documents home from a lawyer I did not know, urging me to sign over power of attorney in case something happened to me before the baby was born. She wanted full control of the trust fund. She wanted everything in her name to secure the legacy. "She is setting a trap," Dr. Aris said, reading the horror on my face. "She knows you would never give her control of the estate unless there was an heir. She invented the heir. She is pumping herself full of dangerous hormones to fake the symptoms, risking her own health just to get you to sign those papers." I looked at the blank ultrasound monitor. It was just static, empty static, just like her womb, just like her love for me. It was all a void. "She is not giving life." Ike, Dr. Aris said, his voice trembling with fear. "She is planning a death. Yours. Once you sign those papers, once she has legal control for this imaginary child, you are going to have a heart attack, or a fall, or an overdose of your medication. You are worth more to her dead than alive, but only if she secures the bag first." I felt nauseous. The woman I slept next to. The woman I prayed with. The woman I was building a nursery for. She was a monster. "What do?" I asked, and for the first time in 40 years I felt small. I felt old. "You act like nothing is wrong," Dr. Aris commanded. "If you confront her now here, she will panic. She might have a backup plan. She might try to hurt you immediately. You need to play the game until you can get to safety." Unlocking the door, he smoothed his white coat and took a deep breath, trying to compose himself. "I am going to bring her back in," he said. "I am going to tell her the machine is broken. I will tell her we cannot see anything today and we need to reschedule for next week. That buys you time. Take her home. Do not let on that you know. And then the moment you can, you run. You call your lawyer. You freeze everything." He opened the door. I stood there, my hands clenching into fists in my pockets. The anger was starting to replace the shock. It was a cold, hard rage. I had built my life on hard work and honesty. I had survived race riots, economic recessions, and competitors trying to run me off the road. I had never let anyone play me for a fool. And this woman, this con artist, thought she could walk into my life, fake a miracle, and steal my legacy. She thought she could prey on an old man's desire for a family. I heard Vanessa's voice in the hallway complaining to the nurse about the water. "Here she comes," Dr. Eris whispered. "Good luck, Ike." Vanessa walked back into the room, a bottle of water in her hand, looking annoyed but still maintaining that glow of the happy, expectant mother. "Did you fix the machine, doctor?" she asked, climbing back onto the table and patting her fake belly. "Little Junior is waiting to say hello to his daddy." I looked at her. I looked at the belly that I had kissed that morning. I looked at the eyes that had lied to me every single day for years. I forced a smile onto my face. It was the hardest thing I have ever done. "The machine is acting up, baby," I said, my voice steady, masking the volcano erupting inside me. "We have to come back. But do not worry. The doctor says everything is going to be just fine." Vanessa pouted, disappointment flashing across her face. But underneath it, I saw something else. Relief. She was relieved she did not have to keep up the charade on the monitor today. "Let's go home, Ike," she said, reaching for my hand. "We have so much planning to do for the nursery, and we really need to sign those papers tonight." I took her hand. It felt cold. "Yes," I said. "We have a lot to do tonight." As we walked out of the clinic, I knew one thing for certain. The Ike Jefferson who walked in here was a happy, naive old man. But the man walking out was a warrior. She wanted a war. She had no idea who she had just declared war on. I was not going to just divorce her. I was going to destroy her. But first I had to survive the night. Because as we got into the car, I saw a text message pop up on her phone screen, which she had left on the center console. It was from a number saved as Trey, my son. The text read, "Did the old man sign yet? The guys are getting impatient. We need to move up the timeline." I looked out the window to hide the fire in my eyes. It wasn't just her. It was my son, too. They were all in on it. They were vultures circling a carcass, but they didn't realize the lion wasn't dead yet. The drive home from the clinic was the longest 40 minutes of my life. My hands gripped the steering wheel of my Ford pickup so tight my knuckles turned the color of ash. Beside me, Vanessa was humming a soft, happy tune, her hand moving in slow, rhythmic circles over that mound on her stomach. That mound of lies. That silicone deception she wore like a badge of honor. Every time she patted it, I felt a fresh wave of bile rise in my throat. I had to keep my eyes on the road because if I looked at her, really looked at her, I knew I would lose control. I would scream. I would crash the car. I would do something that would tip my hand before I was ready. "Ike, honey," she said, her voice dripping with a sweetness that now sounded like venom to my ears. "We really need to call the lawyer when we get home. The doctor said everything is fine, but you know how life is. We need to make sure the amendments to the will are signed. We have to ensure our son's future is ironclad." I gritted my teeth. Our son. There was no son. There was no uterus. There was only a void where she wanted to pour my life's work. I nodded stiffly, keeping my voice low and raspy. "You are right, V," I said. "We have to protect the legacy." Legacy. That word echoed in my head. They had no idea about the true size of the legacy they were trying to steal. For 40 years, I ran my logistics company with a philosophy of silence, while my competitors bought yachts and mansions in the Hamptons to show off. I bought diversified portfolios. I moved money into blind trusts. I set up offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands and Switzerland that didn't have my name on the front door. $18 million. That was the number sitting in the dark, gathering interest, protected by layers of legal fortification that I thought were impenetrable. I had hidden it for a reason. I had hidden it because of Trey. My son Trey, from my first marriage, was 45 years old and had never worked a hard day in his life. He was a man made of wet paper. Whatever direction the wind blew, Trey folded. He had burned through trust funds, failed at 3 businesses I had bankrolled, and blamed everyone but himself. But Trey wasn't the one I feared. It was his wife, Courtney. She was 38, white, with eyes like blue glass and a heart made of calculation. She was the one who pulled Trey's strings. She was the one who looked at my bank account like it was her birthright. They were always crying, poverty, always 1 month away from foreclosure, always needing a bailout. And now, as I pulled into the driveway of my modest 4-bedroom house, I saw a familiar red Mercedes parked in my spot. It was Courtney's car. Of course, they were here. The vultures had gathered. Vanessa gasped with feigned delight. "Oh, look, Ike, Trey, and Courtney are here." They must be so excited to hear about the ultrasound. I parked the truck and turned off the engine. My hands were shaking not from age, but from a cold, murderous rage. I took a deep breath, forcing the tremor to stop. I had to be the old Ike, the naive Ike, the Ike who was just happy to be a father again. "Let's go see them," I said. We walked into the house and the air was thick with expensive perfume and desperation. Trey was sitting on the sofa looking nervous, wringing his hands. But Courtney was standing in the center of the room looking like a general on a battlefield. She was holding a large roll of paper, her posture rigid, her smile sharp enough to cut skin. "Oh, Vanessa," Courtney exclaimed, stepping forward to give me a hug that felt as cold as a block of ice. "How is little Junior? Is he growing big and strong?" "He is doing just fine," Vanessa chirped, walking over to Trey and kissing him on the cheek. "The doctor said he is perfect." Trey looked at me, his eyes shifting away instantly. "That is great, Dad. Really great." Courtney didn't waste a second. She unrolled the paper she was holding and spread it out on the coffee table, sweeping away my magazines. "Since everything is going so well, we took the liberty of meeting with that interior designer I told you about." Courtney said, her voice fast and authoritative. "Look at this, Dad. We cannot have the baby sleeping in just any room. This is the design for the nursery." I looked down at the blueprints. It was obscene. It wasn't a room for a child. It was a showroom for arrogance. Custom Italian cribs, hand-painted murals, heated floors, imported lighting fixtures. "It looks expensive," I muttered, leaning on my cane, playing the part of the hesitant old man. Courtney laughed, a sound that grated on my nerves. "Quality isn't cheap, Ike. We want the best for your heir, don't we? The quote is just $100,000. It includes the structural reinforcements and the smart home integration. $100,000. For a room that would never hold a baby. For a child that didn't exist." I looked at Trey. "Son, that is a lot of money." "I don't know if I have that kind of liquidity right now." Trey looked at Courtney. She shot him a look that could have stripped paint off a wall. He cleared his throat, sweating. "Dad, come on," Trey said, his voice whining. "You have the money. We know you have savings. Do you want your son to grow up in a dump? This is an investment. It is not just an investment. It is a necessity." Courtney cut in, stepping closer to me. She invaded my personal space, smelling of ambition. "The contractor is ready to start tomorrow. He needs the deposit today, 50% up front. Write the check, Ike." She didn't ask. She commanded. Vanessa walked up beside me and wrapped her arm around my waist. "Oh, Ike, look at the little stars on the ceiling plan. It is beautiful. Imagine him sleeping there. Just sign it, baby. For us." I looked at the three of them. My wife with her fake belly, my son with his spineless greed, my daughter-in-law with her predator's eyes. They were a pack of wolves, and I was the old elk they were circling. If I refused, they would get suspicious. They would wonder why the generous old man was suddenly pinching pennies. I needed to buy time. I needed Dr. Montgomery to freeze the assets. I needed the private investigator to get the evidence. I sighed, a long, weary sound of an old man defeated. "All right," I said. "For Junior." Courtney practically shoved her pen into my hand. She pushed her checkbook toward me. I opened it. My hand trembled as I wrote out the date. $50,000. I signed my name. It felt like I was signing a confession of my own stupidity. Courtney snatched the check before the ink was even dry. She blew on it, her eyes gleaming with triumph. "You are the best grandpa ever," she said, but her eyes were already scanning the numbers, making sure I hadn't made a mistake. Trey let out a breath he seemed to have been holding for an hour. "Thanks, Dad." Vanessa kissed my cheek. "You are a good man, Isaiah." Suddenly a wave of nausea hit me so hard my knees buckled. The room spun. The faces of my family distorted, stretching and twisting into grotesque masks. The heat in the room spiked. My stomach cramped violently as if a fist was clenching my insides. "Ike," Vanessa asked, her voice sounding far away. I pulled away from her, stumbling. I don't feel well." I lurched toward the hallway. I barely made it to the guest bathroom before my legs gave out. I collapsed in front of the toilet and vomited violently. My body convulsed, trying to purge something toxic, something deep inside me. I retched until there was nothing left but bile and dry heaves. I gasped for air, sweat pouring down my face, soaking my shirt. My heart was racing, a frantic, irregular rhythm that hammered against my ribs. I leaned my head against the cold porcelain, closing my eyes. And then I tasted it. The aftertaste in my mouth. It wasn't just the acidity of the vomit. It was something else. Something metallic. Something bitter and almond-like that lingered on the back of my tongue. I froze. Every morning for the last 3 months, Vanessa had brought me a special smoothie. She called it her longevity blend. She put vitamins in it, she said. Yellow pills she crushed up because she said they digested better. She watched me drink every drop, smiling that loving smile. "You need to be strong for the baby," she would say. I looked at my reflection in the toilet water, then dragged myself up to the mirror. My eyes were bloodshot. My skin looked gray, waxy. The doctor's words crashed into my mind. "She is planning a death. Yours." It wasn't just stress. It wasn't old age. She was poisoning me. They weren't waiting for nature to take its course. They were speeding it up. They wanted the will signed, the nursery built, and me in the ground before anyone realized there was no baby to inherit the fortune. I gripped the edge of the sink, staring at the dying man in the mirror. "No," I whispered to myself. "Not yet." I washed my face with cold water, scrubbing away the sweat and the fear. I rinsed my mouth, spitting out the metallic taste of betrayal. I unlocked the bathroom door and stepped out. I saw them in the living room. Courtney was high-fiving Trey. Vanessa was laughing, holding the check. They thought they had won. They thought the old man was fading away. I straightened my back. I forced the pain down into the pit of my stomach and locked it there. I walked back into the living room, a ghost returning to haunt the living. "Just a little indigestion," I said, my voice steady, masking the fire burning in my veins. Too much excitement for one day. But as I looked at Vanessa, I didn't see my wife anymore. I saw my executioner. And I knew I had to get that poison out of my house or I wouldn't live to see the end of the week. I told them I needed to lie down. I played the part of the frail old man perfectly, my hand clutching my chest, my breathing shallow and ragged. I told them the excitement of the nursery plans had been too much for my heart and I just needed an hour of quiet in my study. They let me go. Why wouldn't they? To them, I was just a dying cash cow wandering off to pasture. As I walked down the hallway, I could feel their eyes on my back. I could feel the heat of their greed burning through my shirt. But I didn't look back. I walked straight into my home office, closed the heavy oak door, and turned the deadbolt. Only then did I let the mask drop. I slumped against the door, my legs trembling not from age, but from a rage so pure and hot it felt like I had swallowed a coal. I was trapped in my own house with 3 predators who were counting the minutes until I stopped breathing. The metallic taste of the poison was still in my mouth, a reminder that the clock was ticking. But I wasn't dead yet, and I had 1 card left to play. I moved to my desk, my hands shaking as I pulled out my burner phone. I had kept it hidden in a hollowed-out book on the shelf, a habit from my days negotiating with union bosses who played dirty. I dialed Luther. Luther has been my lawyer and my only real friend since we were kids running the streets of the South Side. He is the only man on earth who knows where all the bodies are buried, metaphorically speaking. He answered on the first ring. "Ike, I was just about to call you. We have a problem. A big one." His voice was tight, urgent. Luther never panics. If he was worried, the sky was falling. "What is it, Luther?" I asked, sinking into my leather chair. "Is it the accounts? Did they find the offshore funds?" "No, the money is safe for now," Luther said. "It is the house, Ike. Your house. I just got an alert from the county clerk's office. A lien was just placed on the property this morning." "A lien?" I frowned. "That is impossible. I paid off this house 15 years ago. I don't owe a dime to anyone." "You don't," Luther replied, his voice dropping to a growl. "But Trey does." "Ike, did you sign a limited power of attorney for Trey last year when you went in for your hip surgery?" The memory surfaced through the fog of my anger. Yes, I had. It was supposed to be for medical decisions only, just in case I didn't wake up from the anesthesia. It was a standard form, or at least I thought it was. I signed something, I whispered, but it was just for the hospital. It wasn't just for the hospital, Ike, Luther said. I pulled the document. It gave him authority to encumber real property in the event of your incapacitation. He filed an affidavit this morning claiming you are mentally unfit and unable to manage your affairs. He used that to take out a hard money loan against the house. $500,000, Ike. High interest. Short term. I felt the room spin. $500,000. Trey had mortgaged the roof over my head. He had sold my sanctuary to pay off his gambling debts or whatever hole he had dug himself into this time. "When is it due?" I asked, my voice barely audible. 30 days, Luther said. Or they foreclose. They take the house. Ike, he didn't just borrow money. He signed a confession of judgment. If that money isn't back in 30 days, they kick you out on the street. He sold you out, brother. He sold you out for $500,000. I closed my eyes. My son, the boy I had taught to fish, the boy I had bailed out of jail more times than I could count. He hadn't just betrayed me. He had evicted me. He had signed my death warrant and my eviction notice on the same day. Ike, are you there? Luther asked. I am here, I said, opening my eyes. My vision was clear now. The tears were gone. Fix it, Luther. Stall them. Do whatever you have to do. I have to go. I have to find something. I hung up before he could argue. I sat there for a moment in the silence of my office, listening to the sounds of the house. I could hear the television in the living room. I could hear Courtney's shrill laughter. And then I heard the sound I was waiting for. The heavy thud of footsteps on the stairs, followed by the sound of running water. Vanessa was taking a shower. This was my chance. I knew my wife. She was meticulous about her appearance, but she was careless with her secrets. She thought I was a blind, senile old fool who wouldn't notice a thing. She was wrong. I unlocked the office door and stepped out into the hallway. The house was quiet. Trey and Courtney were probably downstairs celebrating their victory. I moved like a ghost, silent and swift, towards the master bedroom. I slipped inside and closed the door softly behind me. The room smelled of her perfume, that expensive floral scent that used to make me smile but now made my stomach turn. I could hear the shower running in the ensuite bathroom, the hum of the fan masking any noise I made. I went straight to her vanity. I opened drawers, rifling through makeup and jewelry, looking for anything, a receipt, a note, a pill bottle. Nothing. I turned to the nightstand. Nothing but romance novels and hand cream. Then I saw it. The small, decorative wicker trash can in the corner of the room near her closet. Vanessa usually emptied it every morning, but today, in the chaos of the ultrasound and the visit from Trey, she must have forgotten. I knelt beside it, my knees protesting on the hardwood floor. I pushed aside used tissues and cotton pads, and there, buried at the bottom, I found the first piece of the puzzle. It was a blister pack of pills, empty. I picked it up and squinted at the label. It wasn't a prenatal vitamin, it was a diuretic, a water retention pill. And next to it, another empty blister pack. This one was labeled progesterone. I knew enough about medicine to know what that meant. She was taking hormones to bloat her body, to make her breasts tender, to mimic the symptoms of pregnancy. She was poisoning herself just to fool me. But that wasn't the smoking gun. I dug deeper. Beneath a crumpled magazine, I found a receipt. It was from a theatrical supply store in downtown Chicago, a store that specialized in special effects for movies. The item listed was Real Mommy Silicone Prosthetic, second trimester, cost $2,000. I felt the blood roar in my ears. A prosthetic, a fake belly. She bought her pregnancy at a costume shop. I kept digging. I had to find it. If she was in the shower, she wasn't wearing it. I moved to her walk-in closet. Rows of designer dresses and shoes lined the walls, all bought with my money. I checked the shelves. I checked the shoe boxes. Finally, on the top shelf, hidden behind a stack of winter sweaters, I saw a large white box. I pulled it down. My hands were trembling so hard I almost dropped it. I lifted the lid. And there it was. It looked horrifyingly real. A mound of flesh-colored silicone, soft to the touch with a texture that mimicked human skin perfectly. It had adhesive strips on the back to stick to her torso. It even had a fake navel. It was a masterpiece of deception. I stared at it, feeling a mix of revulsion and awe. The length she had gone to, the calculation, the sheer evil of it. This wasn't just a lie, it was a production. She woke up every morning, glued this thing to her body, and looked me in the eye while I kissed it. She let me talk to a piece of rubber. She let me pray over a lump of plastic. I heard the water in the shower stop. Panic surged through me. She was getting out. I had seconds. I shoved the silicone belly back into the box and put it back exactly where I found it. I threw the receipt and the pill wrappers back into the trash can and covered them with tissues. I smoothed out the rug where I had knelt. I needed proof. I needed them to see what I had seen. My word against hers wouldn't be enough in court, not with the fake medical records they were planning to forge. I needed to catch her in the act. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the device I had bought weeks ago back when I just wanted to keep an eye on the housekeepers. It was a micro camera no bigger than a button with a battery life of 12 hours and a direct feed to my phone. I scanned the room. Where could I put it? It had to be somewhere she wouldn't look, but with a clear view of the bed and the closet. My eyes landed on the smoke detector on the ceiling directly above the foot of the bed. It was too high, too difficult to reach quickly. Then I saw the bookshelf. It was cluttered with knickknacks and framed photos of us, photos of a happy couple that never existed. There was a teddy bear on the top shelf, a gift I had bought her for Valentine's Day. It had a red ribbon around its neck. Perfect. I grabbed the bear. I wedged the tiny camera into the knot of the ribbon, angling the lens down towards the center of the room. It was invisible. I placed the bear back on the shelf, turning it slightly so it had the perfect vantage point. I pulled out my phone and checked the feed. The image was crystal clear. I could see the bed. I could see the closet door. I could see the vanity. I heard the bathroom door handle turn. I bolted. I slipped out of the bedroom and closed the door just as I heard her stepping out onto the floor. I sprinted silently back to my office, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I locked the office door and collapsed into my chair, gasping for air. I opened the app on my phone. My hands were shaking so bad I almost dropped it. The screen flickered to life. Vanessa walked into the frame. She was wearing a silk robe, her hair wrapped in a towel. She looked annoyed. She walked over to the vanity and checked her reflection. Then she did something that made my skin crawl. She opened her robe. There it was, the bump, the miracle. She reached behind her back and unclasped something. Then she peeled the silicone prosthetic off her skin like a giant Band-Aid. The sound of the adhesive ripping away was audible even through the tiny microphone. She winced, rubbing her red, irritated skin. "Damn thing itches like hell," she muttered. She tossed the belly onto the bed. It landed with a soft, rubbery thud. It lay there deflated and grotesque, a discarded prop in her twisted play. She picked up her phone and dialed a number. She put it on speaker as she started applying lotion to her stomach. "Courtney, pick up," she snapped. A moment later, Courtney's voice filled the room. "Hey, V, is the old man asleep?" "He is hiding in his office," Vanessa said, laughing. A cold, cruel sound. "He thinks he is having heart palpitations. I told you that extra dose in his smoothie would kick in." He looked like a ghost in the car. I gripped my phone, watching her apply cream to her flat, empty stomach. "Did he sign the check?" Courtney asked. 50,000, Vanessa gloated. "And he didn't even blink. We have the deposit. The contractor starts tomorrow. Once the walls are open, we can claim there is mold or structural damage and double the cost. We will drain his liquid assets in a month." "You are a genius," Courtney said. "And Trey is a mess," Vanessa said, rolling her eyes at herself in the mirror. He was sweating through his shirt. "I thought he was going to crack. You need to keep him on a shorter leash, Courtney. If he blows this before the will is signed, I will kill him myself." "Don't worry about Trey," Courtney said. "I have him handled. He knows if he messes up, the loan sharks get his fingers. He is more afraid of them than he is of hurting his daddy." "Good," Vanessa said. She walked over to the bed and picked up the silicone belly, slapping it playfully. "Just a few more weeks, Court. Once that will is signed, I am going to have a very tragic miscarriage. The stress will be too much for poor Ike. His heart won't take it. And then, jackpot." She laughed again, tossing the fake belly into the air and catching it. I stared at the screen, tears of rage blurring my vision. They weren't just thieves, they were butchers. They were carving up my life piece by piece, laughing while they did it. I hit the record button on my phone screen. I saved the clip. Then I saved it again to the cloud. I sat back in my chair, the silence of the office pressing in on me. I looked at the image of my wife naked and laughing, holding the evidence of her betrayal in her hands. I felt a strange calm wash over me. The fear was gone. The shock was gone. All that was left was the cold, hard certainty of what I had to do. They wanted a show. I would give them a show. They wanted a tragedy. I would write them a tragedy they would never forget. I picked up my burner phone and dialed the private investigator I had used years ago for background checks on employees. Fox. He was expensive, he was ruthless, and he hated liars. "Fox," I said when he answered, "it's Ike. I have a job for you, a big one. I need you to dig up everything on 3 people. My wife, my son, and his wife. I want to know what they eat, where they sleep, and who they owe money to. and I need it by tomorrow. I hung up the phone. I looked at the screen one last time. Vanessa was putting the belly back into its box, hiding it away until the next performance. "Sleep well, Vanessa," I whispered to the screen, "because your nightmare is just beginning." I sat in the dim light of my office, the air conditioning humming a low drone that did nothing to cool the fire raging beneath my skin. My eyes were glued to the small screen of my phone, witnessing a scene that would haunt me until my dying day. The feed from the hidden camera in the bedroom was crisp and clear. Vanessa was sitting on the edge of the bed, applying lotion to her legs, as if she had not just peeled off a fake pregnancy belly and tossed it aside like dirty laundry. She looked calm. She looked relaxed. It was the face of a woman who had no conscience. Then the bedroom door swung open. There was no knock, no polite announcement. Courtney walked in. My daughter-in-law. The woman who usually treated Vanessa with a veiled disdain whenever they were in my presence. In front of me, they played a game of subtle jabs and passive-aggressive comments, a performance designed to make me believe they barely tolerated one another. I had always thought I was the peacekeeper bridging the gap between my young wife and my son's wife. But as I watched them on the screen, that illusion shattered into a million jagged pieces. Courtney didn't sneer. She didn't roll her eyes. She walked straight over to the vanity where Vanessa was sitting and leaned against it, crossing her arms. They looked at each other with the familiarity of war buddies. They were not enemies. They were partners. They were co-conspirators in the demolition of my life. "Did he buy it?" Courtney asked, her voice sharp and impatient. Hook, line, and sinker, Vanessa replied, laughing as she capped her lotion bottle. "He was practically crying in the car. He thinks he is going to be a daddy again. It is pathetic, really. The old fool is so desperate for a legacy he sees what he wants to see." I gripped the arms of my leather chair so hard the wood groaned. Pathink. That is what my love was to them. That is what my 40 years of building a fortune meant. Just a pathetic weakness to be exploited. Courtney began pacing the room, her heels clicking on the hardwood floor. "Good, because we are running out of time, V. I mean it. Trey is losing it." Vanessa turned on the stool to face her. "Trey is always losing it. He is weak. That is why we are doing this. If it were up to him, we would be living in a trailer park. This is different," Courtney snapped, stopping in front of the bed and gesturing wildly. "The loan sharks called again this morning. They are not sending texts anymore. They sent a picture. It was a photo of Trey walking into the grocery store. They are watching him. They said if they do not get the first installment of $200,000 by Friday, they are going to start cutting off fingers." I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. Fingers. My son was involved with people who maimed for money. I knew Trey had debts. I knew he was irresponsible. But I had no idea he was this deep in the hole. Vanessa waved her hand dismissively. "Relax. We got the check for $50,000 today. That will keep them off his back for a week." "A week is not enough," Courtney hissed. "We need the big money. We need access to the trust. Did the old man sign the new will yet?" "Not yet," Vanessa said, standing up and walking over to the closet to pick out a dress. "He said he wants to review it with his lawyer first." "He is being cautious." "Cautious," Courtney practically screamed. "We do not have time for cautious. If he talks to his lawyer, that man might start digging. You said you had this under control." "I do have it under control," Vanessa shot back, her voice dropping an octave into something cold and menacing. "I am handling him. Why do you think he got sick today?" I froze. My breath caught in my throat. Courtney looked at her. "You upped the dose." "I doubled it," Vanessa said calmly, pulling a red dress from a hanger. "I put 4 pills in his smoothie this morning. Did you see him in the bathroom? He was green. His heart must have been racing like a rabbit." I instinctively touched my chest, feeling the steady rhythm of my heart now that the initial shock had worn off. They were discussing my murder with the casual tone of 2 women discussing a lunch menu. "He needs to sign that," Courtney said. "If he dies before he signs it, everything goes to Trey anyway, but it will be tied up in probate for months. We need liquid cash now." "He will sign it," Vanessa assured her. "He is scared. He feels his body failing him. He thinks it is old age. He thinks his ticker is giving out. Tomorrow I am going to tell him the stress of the legal stuff is bad for his health. I will play the concerned wife. I will tell him to just sign it so he can rest." And then Courtney asked. And then Vanessa turned to the mirror, holding the red dress up against her body, admiring her reflection. And then I triple the dose. A massive heart attack in his sleep. Clean, simple, tragic. An old man who just could not hold on long enough to meet his son. The cruelty of it left me breathless. She wasn't just planning to kill me. She was planning to frame my death as a tragedy of my own making. But what about the baby, Courtney asked, pointing to the silicone belly lying on the bed. What happens when there is no baby? Miscarriage, Vanessa said, shrugging. The shock of losing his beloved husband will be too much for the grieving widow. I will lose the baby a week after the funeral. Everyone will pity me. I will be the double victim. And I will be the sole executor of the estate with you and Trey as the beneficiaries of the trust. We split it 3 ways, just like we agreed. I stared at the screen, trying to comprehend the level of evil I was witnessing. This wasn't just greed, this was a soulless, calculated extermination. But then a thought hit me, a realization that cut deeper than the poison. Trey. Courtney mentioned Trey was losing it. She mentioned the loan sharks. She mentioned splitting the money 3 ways. Trey knew. My son, my own flesh and blood, the boy I had raised since he was a toddler, knew they were poisoning me. He knew his wife and his stepmother were plotting to stop my heart, and he said nothing. He did nothing. He was letting them kill me to save his own fingers. I thought about the times I had held him when he cried, the times I had paid for his college, the times I had set him up in business. I had protected him his whole life, and now when I needed protection, he was selling me out to the butchers. He wasn't a victim here. He wasn't an innocent bystander being manipulated by 2 strong women. He was an accomplice. His silence was his signature on my death warrant. I leaned back in my chair, closing my eyes for a moment. The pain in my chest wasn't from the poison anymore. It was the feeling of my heart breaking into dust. The last tether I had to this family, the last shred of hope that maybe, just maybe, my son still loved me was gone. I opened my eyes and looked at the screen again. Vanessa and Courtney were laughing now, laughing about how easy it was, laughing about the stupid old man hiding in his office. You should have seen him, Courtney said. He looked like he was going to pass out when I asked for the $100,000. He is a piggy bank, Vanessa said, a piggy bank that is about to be smashed open. I reached for my burner phone. My hand was steady now. The trembling had stopped. The fear had evaporated, leaving only a cold clarity. I could call the police. I could show them this video. I could have them arrested tonight. It would be easy. A divorce would follow, a restraining order, but that wasn't enough. If I arrested them now, they would get lawyers. They would plead out. They would serve a few years, maybe less, for conspiracy. They would get out and still have their lives. They would still have each other. No, that was too merciful. They wanted to destroy me. They wanted to take everything I had built over 74 years and leave me, as a memory, a tragic footnote in their story of wealth. I wasn't going to let them off the hook with a simple arrest. I wanted them to suffer. I wanted them to feel the walls closing in. I wanted them to turn on each other. I wanted to see the hope drain from their eyes the same way they had planned to drain the life from my body. I needed to construct a trap so elaborate, so inescapable, that when it finally snapped shut, they would wish they were dead. I dialed the number for Fox, the private investigator. It was late, but Fox didn't sleep. He lived for jobs like this. He answered on the second ring. Fox speaking. Fox it is. Ike, I said, my voice low and gravelly. I need you to listen to me very carefully. The job has changed. It is not just a background check anymore. It is a war. I told him everything. I told him about the fake pregnancy. I told him about the poison. I told him about the loan sharks and Trey's debts. I told him about the plan to kill me. Fox listened in silence, a silence that was heavy with professional anger. Do you want me to call the cops, Ike? He asked when I finished. I can have a squad car there in 10 minutes. We can pull them out in handcuffs. No police, I said firmly. Not yet. I want you to dig deeper. I want you to find the loan sharks Trey owes money to. I want names, I want amounts, and I want to know who is holding the leash. You want to pay them off? Fox asked, confused. Hell no, I growled. I want to buy the debt. There was a pause on the line, and then I heard a low, dark chuckle. I see where this is going, Fox said. You want to own him. I want to own all of them, I said. I want you to find out everything about Courtney's past. A woman this cold has done this before. Find her ex-husbands. Find her criminal record. And Vanessa, find out where she got those pills. Find out who forged her medical records if she has any. I want every dirty secret they have ever buried. Consider it done, Fox said. But Ike, you are in that house with them. If they are poisoning you, you are not safe. You need to get out. I cannot leave, I said, looking at the screen where Vanessa was now putting on the red dress, preparing to play the role of the loving wife for dinner. If I leave, they will know I know. They will run. Or they will drain the accounts I haven't secured yet. I have to stay. I have to play the part. Do not drink anything she gives you. Fox warned. Do not eat anything she cooks. I know I said. I will be careful. But Fox, I need one more thing. Name it. I need you to get me a meeting with the district attorney. The one who owes me a favor from the union strikes back in the 90s. Tell him I have a racketeering case that is going to make his career. But tell him I need a few days to tie the bow on it. You are playing a dangerous game, Ike Fox said. I built an empire on dangerous games, I replied. Get me the info, Fox. Tonight. I hung up the phone and slipped it back into my pocket. I looked at the screen one last time. Vanessa and Courtney were hugging. A hug of victory. A hug of predators who had just cornered their prey. I stood up. I straightened my shirt. I checked my face in the mirror. I looked tired. I looked old. Good. That is exactly what they needed to see. I unlocked the office door and walked out into the hallway. I could smell dinner cooking downstairs. It smelled like roast chicken. My favorite. I walked down the stairs, my hand gripping the banister. I was walking into the lion's den. I was walking into a house filled with people who wanted me dead. But as I reached the bottom step, I smiled. A small, grim smile that no one saw. They thought they were writing the end of my story. But they had forgotten one thing. I was the one holding the pen, and I was about to write a plot twist that would bury them all. The next morning, the house smelled of bacon and fresh coffee. A domestic perfume sprayed over a crime scene. I walked into the kitchen leaning heavily on my cane, playing the part of the frail old man they all wanted me to be. Vanessa was at the stove humming that same tune she used to hum when we first got married. Back then, I thought it was the sound of a happy woman. Now I knew it was the sound of a siren luring a sailor onto the rocks. Trey and Courtney were already at the table. Trey looked like he hadn't slept in a week. His eyes were darting around the room, landing on everything but me. Courtney, on the other hand, looked fresh sharp like a blade that had just been whetted. She was reading a magazine, but I could feel her tracking my every movement. "Good morning, family," I said, my voice raspy. "Morning, Dad." Trey mumbled into his coffee cup. Courtney didn't look up. "Morning, Ike." "Sleep well like a baby," I lied. Vanessa turned from the stove, a beaming smile plastered on her face. She was holding a large mug of steaming warm milk. It wasn't coffee. It wasn't juice. It was a thick, creamy white liquid that smelled faintly of almonds and nutmeg. "Here you go, baby," she said, walking over and placing the mug in front of me. "I made you my special warm milk with honey and turmeric. It is good for the heart. And good for the baby," she added, patting her silicone stomach. "We are drinking it together in spirit." I looked down at the mug. The steam rose in lazy spirals. It looked innocent. It looked comforting. But I knew better. I knew that inside that white liquid was a cocktail of crushed pills and malice. Dr. Eris had warned me. Fox had warned me. And my own body, still aching from yesterday's nausea, was screaming at me not to touch it. "Thank you, V," I said, picking up the mug. "It smells delicious." "Drink it while it is hot," Courtney said from behind her magazine. "You need your strength for today. The contractor is coming to start on the nursery walls." I brought the mug to my lips. I felt their eyes on me. All three of them. Trey had stopped chewing. Vanessa was wiping her hands on a dish towel, watching me with the intensity of a hawk. Courtney had lowered her magazine just an inch. They were waiting. They were waiting for me to swallow my own death. "I need to take my morning pills first," I said, setting the mug back down. I left them in the living room. I stood up, grabbing the mug. "I will take this with me. I want to sit in my recliner for a bit." Vanessa's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. "Do not let it get cold, Ike. It works best when it is warm." "I won't," I promised. I walked slowly into the living room, feeling their gaze burning into my back until I turned the corner. As soon as I was out of their line of sight, I moved fast. I went to the large potted fern in the corner of the room, a plant I had nurtured for 10 years. I poured the entire contents of the mug into the soil. The white liquid soaked into the dark earth, disappearing instantly. "I'm sorry, old friend," I whispered to the plant. "Better you than me." I waited a moment, counting to 10. Then I staged the performance of a lifetime. I dropped the empty mug onto the hardwood floor. It didn't break, but it made a loud, heavy thud. Then I let out a groan, a guttural sound of pain and fear. I collapsed onto the rug, clutching my chest, kicking my legs just enough to make noise. Help. I gasped loud enough for them to hear in the kitchen. My chest. It took them 3 seconds. I heard the chairs scrape against the kitchen floor. I heard running footsteps. Vanessa was the first one in. She saw me on the floor, curled in a fetal position, gripping my shirt. "Ike," she screamed. "Oh my God." Trey and Courtney ran in behind her. Trey looked terrified. His face went pale, and he looked like he might throw up. But Courtney stopped in the doorway. She didn't run to me. She didn't kneel. She just watched, her eyes cold and calculating, assessing the situation like a mechanic looking at a broken engine. "It hurts," I wheezed, squeezing my eyes shut. "I can't breathe." "Call 911. Vanessa knelt beside me, her hands hovering over me but not touching. Oh God, oh God. Is it a heart attack? Did he drink the milk?" "The cup is empty," Trey said, pointing to the mug on the floor. "He drank it." "Call 911. I shouted again, putting every ounce of desperation I could muster into my voice. "Please." Trey reached for his pocket, pulling out his phone. His hands were shaking so bad he almost dropped it. "I am calling. I am calling right now." No, Courtney's voice cracked through the room like a whip. Trey froze. Vanessa looked up at her. Courtney walked over to Trey and put her hand over his phone, pushing it down. "Do not call 911. "What?" Trey stammered. "But he is dying, Courtney. Look at him." "He is not dying," Courtney said calmly, her eyes fixed on me. "He is just having a spell. He had one yesterday, remember, in the bathroom. It is just indigestion or a panic attack." "Panic attack!" Trey yelled. He is clutching his chest. "We have to call an ambulance. And what happens when the ambulance comes?" Trey, Courtney hissed, getting in his face. "They take him to the hospital. They run tests. They find out he is stressed. And then what? They keep him for observation for 3 days. We lose 3 days. The contractor is coming today. The loan sharks want their money on Friday. We do not have time for a hospital drama." I lay there listening to them debate my life. My own son wanted to save me, but he was too weak to stand up to his wife. And my wife. My loving Vanessa. She was silent. She was looking at me, biting her lip, calculating the odds. "He looks really bad, Court," Vanessa whispered. "What if he actually dies right now? The will isn't signed. If he dies, he dies." Courtney shrugged. "We still get the house. We still get the statutory share. It is messy, but we will survive. But if he goes to the hospital and some doctor starts asking questions about what he ate or drank, that is a problem we cannot handle." There it was, the naked truth. They weren't afraid of me dying. They were afraid of getting caught. They were afraid a toxicology report would show the poison. I let out a long, rattling breath, letting my body go limp. I let my eyes roll back slightly, watching them through the slits of my eyelids. "Mom, do something." Trey pleaded. "Let him rest," Courtney commanded. "Just let him rest." "Ambulances are expensive, Trey. We don't need another bill. Help me get him onto the sofa. If he is still like this in an hour, we will call his regular doctor. Not 911. Trey hesitated, looking from his wife to his dying father. And then he broke. He put his phone back in his pocket. He chose her. He chose the fear of her over the life of me. "Okay," he whispered. "Okay." They lifted me. Trey took my shoulders. Vanessa took my feet. They dragged me onto the sofa like a sack of potatoes. Courtney stood back, supervising, making sure they didn't knock over any expensive lamps. They laid me down. Vanessa put a pillow under my head. "Just breathe." "Ike," she whispered, stroking my forehead. Her hand felt like a spider crawling on my skin. "Just relax. It will pass." They stepped back. They stood in a semicircle around the sofa, watching, waiting. The silence stretched out. The clock on the mantel ticked. Tick, tock, tick, tock. Counting down the seconds of my life. I lay there feeling the rhythm of my own heart strong and steady, thanks to the fact that the poison was currently killing my Fern instead of me. I realized then that my life hung by a thread. If I stayed here, if I let this continue, I wouldn't wake up tomorrow morning. They were impatient, they were reckless, and they were desperate. I had to move the timeline up. I had to get them out of the house. I had to get them into a public place where I could drop the hammer. I let out a gasp. My eyes snapped open. I sat up suddenly, inhaling deeply as if I had just broken the surface of the water after drowning. "Oh," I shouted. They jumped back. Trey looked like he had seen a ghost. Vanessa clutched her chest. Even Courtney looked surprised. "Dad?" Trey asked. I looked around the room, blinking rapidly. I rubbed my chest. I took deep, exaggerated breaths. "I saw it," I whispered, staring into the middle distance. "I saw the light." "What?" Vanessa asked, stepping closer. "What light?" I almost went, I said, grabbing Vanessa's hand. I felt my soul leaving my body. It was terrifying. But then I heard a voice. "What voice?" Courtney asked, her eyes narrowing. "A voice telling me it wasn't time," I said, looking at her with a manic intensity. "A voice telling me I have unfinished business. I have to secure the legacy. I have to make sure my son, my unborn son, is protected." Relief washed over their faces like a tide. I was playing their song. I stood up, shaky on my legs, leaning on the cane. The pain. It is gone. It was a warning, a sign from God. I cannot waste another minute. "That is right," Dad, Trey said, rushing to support my arm. "You need to sign the papers. We have them right here." "No," I said firmly, pulling away. "Not here. Not like this. This is a miracle, Trey. I survived. I was given a second chance. We cannot just sign papers in a dark living room. We need to celebrate. We need to announce it to the world." "Announce what?" Courtney asked, suspicious. "The baby," I said, turning to Vanessa. "We never did a gender reveal. We never told the world properly. I want to do it this weekend. Saturday. A big party. Here in the garden." "A party?" Vanessa asked. "Ike, are you sure you just had a heart attack?" "It wasn't a heart attack," I declared. "It was a wake-up call. I want to invite everyone. My old business partners, the union reps, the guys from the golf club, your friends Trey, everyone. And at the party, right after we reveal if it is a boy or a girl, I will sign the new will." Courtney's eyes lit up. "A public signing, a room full of witnesses. It would be ironclad. No one could contest it later." "That is a wonderful idea, Ike," she said, a smile slowly spreading across her face. "A celebration of life and legacy." "Yes," I said. "I want you to organize it, Courtney. Spare no expense. Get the best caterers, the best decorations. I want it to be the event of the year. I will give you my credit card." Courtney practically salivated. She saw dollar signs. She saw a chance to skim off the top. She saw victory. "Consider it done," she said. And the lawyer Vanessa asked. "Invite him," I said. "Tell Luther to bring the papers. We will sign them on the podium under the lights with the blue or pink confetti falling around us. It will be poetic." Trey clapped me on the back. "That is awesome, Dad. Really." I looked at them. They were giddy. They were already spending the money in their heads. They thought they had manipulated the old man into one last grand gesture before he kicked the bucket. "I am going to go rest now," I said, walking towards the stairs. "I have a lot of calls to make. I need to invite my friends." "You do that," Ike, Vanessa said, blowing me a kiss. "Rest up. We have a big weekend ahead." I walked up the stairs, listening to their excited whispers below. They were planning the party. They were planning my funeral. But as I reached the landing, I pulled out my phone and sent a text to Fox. Code red. "It is happening Saturday. Get the team ready. I am throwing a party and I need you to bring the handcuffs." I went into my bedroom and locked the door. I looked at the fern in the corner of my room, the one I hadn't watered yet. I would have to be careful. They thought they were walking into a coronation. They had no idea they were walking into an ambush. The gender reveal was going to reveal a lot more than just pink or blue. It was going to reveal the monsters living in my house. And I couldn't wait to see the look on their faces when the confetti turned into subpoenas. I left the house under the pretense of going to the pharmacy to pick up my heart medication. I walked with a stoop, leaning on my cane until I turned the corner of the block. Then I straightened my back and hailed a cab. I gave the driver the address of a nondescript office building in downtown Chicago, a place that looked like nothing from the outside but held the secrets of half the city's elite on the inside. This was Luther's fortress. Luther was waiting for me in his office, a room that smelled of old books and expensive cigar smoke. He looked at me with eyes that had seen too much of the world's ugliness. He didn't offer me a drink. He knew I was on the clock. "Is it done?" I asked, sitting down in the chair opposite his massive mahogany desk. Luther slid a thick document across the desk. It was bound in blue legal paper, heavy and official. It looked like a shield. It looked like a weapon. It is done, Luther said, his voice gravelly. But Ike, are you sure about this? This is a dangerous game. If they figure it out before the party, they won't. I cut him off. They are blinded by greed. They see the numbers, Luther. They don't see the man. I opened the document. It was a masterpiece of legal fiction. The last will and testament of Isaiah Jefferson. In bold letters, it stated that in the event of my death, 90% of my estate, the cash, the properties, the stocks, the offshore holdings would be placed in an irrevocable trust for the benefit of my unborn child. And the guardians of that trust, the people who would have full, unsupervised control of the assets until the child turned 21, Vanessa Jefferson and Trey Jefferson. It was exactly what they wanted. It was the keys to the kingdom. It was a license to steal $18 million. But I wasn't handing them the keys. I was handing them a grenade. I turned to page 12. Buried deep in the dense, single-spaced legalese of the conditions of inheritance section, there was a small clause, Clause 14b. Luther had typed it in a slightly lighter font, a gray that looked like a printer error, barely distinguishable from the white paper unless you were looking for it. And the text was small, tiny. This trust shall only be funded and valid upon the successful completion of a DNA paternity test conducted by a court-appointed laboratory, confirming Isaiah Jefferson as the biological father of the child post-birth. I ran my finger over the line. It was the poison pill. It was the trap door. Without a baby, without my DNA, this document was worth less than the paper it was printed on. It is perfect, Luther. I said, a cold smile touching my lips. They will never read this far. They will see the 90% on page 1 and start popping champagne. Luther nodded, though he didn't smile. He looked worried. Ike, these people. They tried to poison you. They are desperate. Once you show them this, the clock speeds up. They will want to execute the will immediately. I know I said closing the folder. That is why I am throwing the party on Saturday. I need them all in one place. I need witnesses. I need the police to see the look on their faces when the trap snaps shut. I took the document. It felt heavy in my hand, heavy with the weight of my life's work and the betrayal of the people I loved. I went back to the house. I made sure to look exhausted when I walked through the door. I wanted them to see a man who was beaten, a man who had accepted his fate. They were in the living room exactly where I had left them. The air was thick with tension. They looked up when I entered, their eyes predatory, scanning my face for signs of weakness. Vanessa rushed over to me, her fake belly pressing against my arm. Ike, baby, you were gone so long. We were worried. Did you get your medicine? I ignored her question. I walked over to the coffee table and dropped the blue folder onto it. The sound of it hitting the wood was like a gunshot. I went to see Luther. I said, my voice low and defeated. I told him to draw it up. I told him I couldn't fight anymore. I told him to give you what you wanted. The room went silent. You could hear a pin drop. Trey stared at the folder, his mouth slightly open. Courtney's eyes widened, her pupils dilating like a shark smelling blood in the water. What is this? Ike, Vanessa asked, her voice trembling with feigned innocence. It is the new will, I said, sinking onto the sofa and rubbing my temples. It gives everything to the baby. And it puts you and Trey in charge. 90%. I just want peace. I want to know my son is taken care of. Courtney didn't wait. She lunged for the folder. She ripped it open, her eyes darting across the pages, scanning for the numbers. She flipped past the preamble, past the definitions, straight to the distribution of assets. Oh my God, she whispered. What Trey asked, leaning over her shoulder. What does it say? She looked up at him, her face glowing with a terrifying mixture of greed and triumph. 90%, Trey. He did it. He actually did it. It is all here. The trust, the guardianship, full control. She looked at me, and for the first time in 10 years she smiled at me with something that looked like affection. But I knew it wasn't love. It was the way a butcher smiles at a prize pig. Dad, this is incredibly generous, Courtney said, her voice dripping with syrup. You have no idea what this means for the family. We are going to make sure your legacy is honored. We are going to build the most amazing life for this child. Vanessa sat next to me, grabbing my hand and kissing it. Oh, Ike, I knew you would do the right thing. You are such a good father. Such a good husband. This takes all the worry away. Now you can just relax. You don't have to stress about anything. I looked at her. I looked at the tears in her eyes. Tears of joy, for the money, not for me. I just need to sign it, I muttered. Luther said it needs to be notarized. We can do that, Trey said quickly, too quickly. We can get a notary here tonight. We don't have to wait. No, I said firmly. Not tonight. I am too tired. My heart, it feels weak today. I want to do it right. I want to do it at the party on Saturday, in front of everyone. I want my friends to see that I am taking care of my family. Courtney's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. Saturday, Dad, that is 3 days away. What if something happens? Why take the risk? Let's just sign it now and we can announce it at the party. I shook my head. No, it has to be the party. It is my condition. Saturday. When we reveal the gender I sign the will, it will be a celebration. I saw Courtney and Vanessa exchange a look. A silent communication passed between them. They were calculating the risk. 3 days. Could they keep me alive for 3 days? Could they keep the charade going? Okay, Dad, Courtney said, patting my shoulder. Saturday it is. It will be the event of the century. She stood up, clutching the draft of the will to her chest, like it was a holy relic. I am going to put this in the safe, she said, just to keep it secure. She walked out of the room, her hips swaying a bounce in her step that hadn't been there an hour ago. Trey followed her, looking like a puppy who had just been given a steak. Vanessa stayed with me. She stroked my hair. You rest now, Ike. I will make you some soup. No pills this time, I promise. Just good, healthy soup. I closed my eyes, letting her think I was falling asleep. Thank you, V, I whispered. She kissed my forehead. It felt like the kiss of death. I stayed on the sofa for another hour, listening to them move around the house. The atmosphere had changed completely. The tension was gone, replaced by a manic energy. They were already spending the money. I could hear Trey on the phone in the kitchen, probably calling the loan sharks, telling them the payday was coming. I needed to know what they were saying when I wasn't in the room. I needed to know if they had seen the fine print. I needed to be sure the trap was set. I stood up, groaning for effect, and shuffled towards the stairs. I am going to bed, I called out. Sleep tight, Dad, Trey yelled from the kitchen, his voice cheerful. I walked up the stairs, but I didn't go to my room. I stopped on the landing, taking off my shoes so I could move silently. I crept down the hallway towards the guest room where Courtney and Trey were staying. The door was slightly ajar. I pressed myself against the wall, straining to hear. 18 million, Trey. Courtney was whispering, her voice intense. Do you have any idea how much that is? We can pay off the sharks, buy a house in Aspen, and still never work a day in our lives. I know, baby. I know, Trey said. He sounded breathless. I can't believe he signed it. I thought he was going to fight us. He is weak, Courtney scoffed. He is old and scared, and he thinks he is buying his way into heaven. It is pathetic, but it works for us. Did you read the whole thing? Trey asked. Is it watertight? I skimmed it, Courtney said. It is standard boilerplate. Luther is a good lawyer, I will give him that. It locks everything down tight. Once he signs that on Saturday, the estate is ours. Even if he tries to change it later, we can prove he was of sound mind when he signed this one because he did it in front of 100 witnesses. It is genius. I held my breath. She hadn't seen it. She had skimmed it. Her greed had made her sloppy. She saw the 90% and stopped reading. The gray ink, the tiny font, it had worked. But then her voice dropped lower. It became a hiss, a sound that made the hair on my arms stand up. But we cannot leave anything to chance, Trey. Saturday is the finish line. As soon as that pen leaves the paper, as soon as the ink is dry, we end this. What do you mean? Trey asked. I mean, we don't wait for a heart attack, Courtney whispered. We don't wait for nature. Saturday night, after the party, when he is drunk on champagne and happiness, we give him the final dose, a massive one, enough to stop a horse. Trey was silent for a moment. You mean, kill him? That night he will go to sleep and never wake up, Courtney said coldly. The doctor will call it a stroke or cardiac arrest brought on by the excitement of the party. He is 74. Trey, no one will ask questions, especially not when the grieving widow and the loving son are crying over his body. But right after he signs, won't that look suspicious? It looks like tragedy, Courtney corrected him. It looks like fate. He held on just long enough to secure his child's future. It is poetic, Trey. The perfect ending to a sad little life. I felt a tear slide down my cheek. Not of sadness, but of finality. It was over. Any lingering doubt, any tiny shred of hope that my son might have a conscience was gone. He was going to let her do it. He was going to watch me sign away my life's work, and then he was going to watch me die hours later. Okay, Trey whispered. Okay, let's do it. Saturday night. Good boy, Courtney said. Now let's go look at Ferraris online. I want a red one. I backed away from the door, my heart cold as stone. They were already celebrating my murder. They were picking out cars paid for with my blood. I went into my bedroom and locked the door. I walked over to the window and looked out at the backyard where the tent for the party would be set up, where the stage would be built. They thought Saturday was their coronation. They thought it was the day they would inherit the kingdom. They were wrong. Saturday wasn't a coronation. It was an execution. But I wasn't the one who was going to die. I pulled out my phone and sent a text to Luther. The fish took the bait. They didn't read the fine print. Proceed with the setup. Then I sent a text to Fox. Saturday night. I need extra security. They are planning to move immediately after the signing. Be ready. I lay down on the bed, staring at the ceiling. I could hear their laughter coming from down the hall. They were happy. They were dreaming of their millions. Let them laugh, I thought. Let them dream. Because when they wake up on Saturday, they are going to find themselves in a nightmare they can never escape. And I was going to be the one to tuck them in. The Friday before the party, I woke up with a heavy stone in my chest. It was not the poison. I had not touched Vanessa's cooking in 2 days, surviving on protein bars I kept locked in my office safe and water from sealed bottles. The heaviness was grief. I knew what I had to do, but there was one small part of me, the part that had held a 3-year-old boy's hand as he took his first steps, that needed to be sure. I needed to look my son in the eye one last time, away from the witch he married and the snake he called a stepmother. I needed to give him one final chance to save his soul. I found Trey in the kitchen, staring blankly into a cup of black coffee. He looked terrible. His skin was clammy, and there were dark bags under his eyes that looked like bruises. He jumped when I walked in, spilling coffee on the granite counter. "Easy, son," I said, leaning on my cane. "You look like you have seen a ghost." "I am just tired," Dad Trey stammered, wiping up the spill with a napkin, his hands shaking. "Just nervous about the party tomorrow. It is a big day." "It is a big day," I agreed. "But today is quiet. The contractor is gone. The women are out shopping for decorations. It is just us men." Trey looked at the door as if he wanted to run through it. "What do you want to do?" "I want to go fishing," I said. "Just for an hour. Down at the old pier on the lake, like we used to when you were a kid. Remember?" Trey hesitated. I saw him checking his watch, calculating the time. He was probably wondering if he could spare an hour from his schedule of plotting my murder. "I don't know, Dad," he said. "Courtney wanted me to help with the chairs." "Courtney can handle the chairs," I said, my voice firm. "I am an old man, Trey. I am signing away my life's work tomorrow. I just want 1 hour with my son. Is that too much to ask?" The guilt hit him. I saw it flash across his face. He nodded slowly. "Okay, Dad, let's go." We drove to the lake in my truck. The cabin was silent. I drove slow, watching him out of the corner of my eye. He was texting furiously, hiding the screen from me, probably updating his handlers. The old man took me fishing. "Don't worry, I will be back soon." We got to the pier. The water was gray and choppy, reflecting the overcast sky. Ideally, it would have been a beautiful day, but the weather matched my mood. We walked to the end of the wooden dock and sat on the bench we had sat on 1,000 times before. I baited the hooks, not because I wanted to catch anything, but because I needed something to do with my hands. I cast the line out, and the splash echoed in the silence. We sat there for 10 minutes without speaking. The wind bit at our faces. "Trey," I said, finally, keeping my eyes on the horizon. "I am tired." Trey shifted on the bench. "I know, Dad. The party planning has been a lot." "No, son," I said. "I am tired. In my bones. I have been fighting for a long time. Fighting to build the business. Fighting to keep this family together. And lately I feel like I am losing the battle." Trey went still. He didn't look at me. "I have been thinking about what happens next." I continued, my voice low and raspy. "After tomorrow. After I sign the will. I feel like my job is done. I feel like maybe it is time for me to go. This was the test. This was the moment. If there was any love left in him, any scrap of decency, this was where he would grab my arm and tell me to stop talking like that. This was where he would tell me I had 20 years left. This was where he would confess. I turned to look at him. I saw a tear leak out of the corner of his eye. It rolled down his cheek and dripped onto his expensive jacket. He was crying. For a second, my heart leaped. He cares. He is crying for me. But then he spoke. "Dad," he choked out, his voice trembling. "You have worked so hard. You have done so much for everyone." He turned to face me, and I saw the truth in his wet eyes. It wasn't sorrow. It was relief. He was relieving himself of the guilt. He was convincing himself that killing me was a mercy. "If you are tired, Dad, maybe it is okay to let go," he whispered. "You have earned your rest. You don't have to worry anymore. Vanessa, and the baby, and Courtney, we will be fine. We will take care of everything." The air left my lungs. He wasn't saving me. He was giving me permission to die. He was validating the murder plot. "Rest," he said. "Let go," he said. He was practically putting the pillow over my face with his words. "You think so?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "You think the family will be okay without me?" "We will honor you," Trey said, sniffing. "We will make sure your legacy lives on." "Courtney is really good with money, Dad. She has big plans, and Vanessa, she loves you so much. She just wants you to be at peace." At peace, that was code for 6 feet under. I looked at my son. I looked for the little boy who used to cry when he scraped his knee. I looked for the teenager who promised he would make me proud. He wasn't there. The man sitting next to me was a hollow shell filled with fear and greed. He was weak, and his weakness had made him dangerous. I turned back to the water. The line was slack. There were no fish biting today. "Okay, son," I said, my voice dead. "Okay. I guess I am ready then." Trey let out a long, shaky breath. He wiped his eyes. "It will be beautiful, Dad. Tomorrow, it will be a beautiful send-off." He didn't mean the party. He meant the funeral. Suddenly, the silence was shattered by a jarring electronic ringtone. It was Trey's phone. He jumped as if he had been shot. He scrambled to pull it out of his pocket, almost dropping it on the dock. He looked at the screen, and the color drained from his face instantly. His eyes went wide with terror. "I have to take this," he stammered, standing up and backing away. It is work." He walked fast down the pier, putting distance between us. But the wind was blowing towards me, and in his panic he raised his voice. I listened. I didn't look at him, but I engaged every sense I had. "I told you it is happening," Trey hissed into the phone. "Stop calling me." There was a pause as the person on the other end screamed something I couldn't hear, but I could hear the buzzing of the angry voice. No fingers," Trey shouted, his voice cracking with hysteria. "I promised you tomorrow night. The papers are getting signed tomorrow. Once the ink is dry, we own it all." He listened again, pacing in small, frantic circles. "Yes, Sunday. You will have your money on Sunday morning. I swear to God, just back off. We are doing it. The old man is ready. He is practically begging for it." He hung up the phone and stood there for a moment, breathing heavy, his back to me. I sat on the bench, feeling a coldness that had nothing to do with the wind. He is practically begging for it. That is how he described his father telling him he was tired. He owed money, dangerous money, and he had used my life as collateral. He wasn't killing me for an inheritance. He was killing me to settle a score. He was trading my heartbeat for his safety. He composed himself, smoothing his hair, and walked back to me. He forced a smile onto his face, a grotesque mask of filial piety. "Sorry about that, Dad," he said. "Just some last-minute details for the catering. They wanted to know if we preferred salmon or steak." "Steak," I said, standing up and reeling in the line. "I want steak. Rare. I want to taste the blood." Trey blinked, confused by my tone. Sure, Dad. Steak. Let's go home," I said. "I have seen enough." We walked back to the truck. I didn't offer him my arm. I didn't lean on him. I walked under my own power. As I drove us back to the house, I looked at him one last time. He was looking out the window, biting his fingernails, lost in his own nightmare. I felt a single tear slide down my cheek. It was hot and salty. It tracked through the wrinkles of my face and dripped off my chin. I wiped it away with the back of my hand. That was it. The last tear. I had cried rivers for this boy. I had cried when his mother left us. I had cried when he graduated. I had cried when he got married, but I would not cry for him again. The boy I raised was dead. He died a long time ago, buried under layers of entitlement and cowardice. The man sitting next to me was a stranger who had just confirmed he was going to execute me on Saturday night to pay a gambling debt. Goodbye, Trey, I thought. I pulled into the driveway. The house loomed over us. Go inside, I said. Help your wife. I have to make a call. Trey hopped out, relieved to be away from me. Sure, Dad. Rest up. He ran into the house, running towards his accomplices, running towards his doom. I watched the door close behind him. I took out my burner phone and dialed Fox. Fox. I said, my voice like granite. I just confirmed it. The son is the weak link. He owes the money and he promised payment by Sunday. Got it, Ike Fox said. We are ready. One more thing, Fox. Yeah. When the hammer drops on Saturday, I want Trey to be the first one to fall. I want him to see it coming. I want him to know it was me. Understood, Fox said softly. I hung up. I sat in the truck for a moment longer watching the house. My heart was a stone in my chest. I had no son. I had no wife. I had no family. But I had a plan. And come Saturday night, I was going to teach them all a lesson about what happens when you try to bury a man who is still breathing. I was going to turn their victory party into a wake, and the only thing being buried would be their future. I sat in the darkness of my home office, the only light coming from the glowing screen of my laptop. It was 2 a.m. on Saturday, the day of the party, the day of my supposed execution. The house was silent, but it felt like the silence of a graveyard. Upstairs, my executioners were sleeping, dreaming of the fortune they thought they had already won. Down here, I was staring into the abyss of who they really were. My private investigator, Fox, had come through. An encrypted email had just landed in my inbox with the subject line, "The Truth." I opened it and my breath hitched in my throat. I thought I knew what I was dealing with. I thought I was dealing with a greedy wife and a manipulative daughter-in-law. I was wrong. I was living with monsters. Professional predators who had done this before. I opened Vanessa's file first. Her face smiled back at me from an old hospital ID badge, but the name wasn't Vanessa Jefferson. It was Vanessa Lewis. The file detailed a history that read like a horror movie script. She hadn't just been a nurse. She had been a geriatric care specialist in Ohio 10 years ago. I read the disciplinary report from the state medical board. License revoked permanently. The charges were terrifying. Financial exploitation of vulnerable adults, unauthorized administration of sedatives, and theft. She had targeted 3 male patients, all widowers, all wealthy, all with no close family. She had seduced them, isolated them, and slowly drained their accounts while keeping them in a chemically induced fog. One of them died of a suspicious overdose just weeks after changing his will. I felt a cold sweat break out on my forehead. It was her playbook. The smoothies, the pills, the isolation, the sudden urgency to change the will. She wasn't improvising. She was following a script she had perfected a decade ago. I wasn't her husband, I was just her latest patient. I was project number 4. She had looked me in the eye for 10 years, slept in my bed, and played the role of the loving wife while waiting for the perfect moment to strike. She was a black widow in nurse's scrubs. I closed her file, feeling sick to my stomach. I opened Courtney's. If Vanessa was the poison, Courtney was the knife. Courtney Miller, that was her maiden name. The file showed 2 previous marriage licenses, 2 divorces. Both husbands were successful businessmen. Both filed for bankruptcy within 2 years of marrying her. The first one, a real estate developer in Florida, lost everything. His assets were transferred to shell companies controlled by Courtney just before the divorce. He ended up living in a motel. The second one, a tech entrepreneur in Austin, had a sudden mental breakdown and was committed to a facility while Courtney liquidated his stock options. She was a parasite, a financial vampire who latched onto men, sucked them dry, and moved on to the next host. And now she had latched onto my weak, foolish son. She wasn't building a life with Trey. She was using him as a battering ram to break into my vault. She knew Trey was the weak link, the entry point into the Jefferson fortune. I looked at their mugshots and old IDs on my screen. These were the women in my house. These were the women planning my gender reveal party. They were not family. They were a criminal enterprise. And my son was their willing accomplice. I needed to check my accounts. Fox's report mentioned that Courtney moved fast when she smelled blood. If they were planning to kill me tonight, they would want to make sure the money was accessible immediately. I logged into my primary bank portal. My hands were shaking not from fear, but from a rage so intense it felt like it was burning my fingertips. I navigated to my retirement fund, the one account I kept liquid for emergencies. It was supposed to have $500,000 in it. Money I had set aside for a rainy day or maybe a real medical crisis. The balance flashed on the screen. 0. I stared at it blinking. 0. I clicked on the transaction history. A withdrawal had been made yesterday. A wire transfer. The destination was an account in the Cayman Islands, an account I did not recognize. I clicked on the authorization document. It was a digital scan of a transfer request form. And there at the bottom was my signature, Isaiah Jefferson. But it wasn't my signature. The loop on the J was too wide. The slant was wrong. It was a forgery. A clumsy, desperate forgery. I knew that handwriting. I had seen it on birthday cards. I had seen it on failing report cards. I had seen it on loan applications I had co-signed. It was Trey. My son had walked into a bank, impersonated me, or used that damned power of attorney I had signed for his medical proxy and forged my name to steal $500,000. He hadn't waited for me to die. He hadn't waited for the will. He had robbed me while I was sitting in the next room drinking his wife's poison. That money was gone. I knew I would never see it again. It was probably already in the hands of the loan sharks or sitting in Courtney's secret stash. The betrayal was total. It was absolute. There was no coming back from this. My son was a thief. My wife was a killer. My daughter-in-law was a professional con artist. I sat back in my chair and let out a long, shuddering breath. The grief I had felt yesterday at the lake was gone. The hesitation was gone. The old Ike, the father, the husband, the provider, he died in that chair, staring at a zero balance. The man who stood up was someone else. I was the man who had negotiated with mobsters in the 80s to keep my trucks running. I was the man who had survived hostile takeovers. I was the man who knew how to scorch the earth. If they wanted money, I would give them money. I would give them exactly what they deserved. I reached into the hidden compartment of my desk and pulled out a small black device. It was a secure token generator for my Swiss banking app. The one account they didn't know about. The one account that held the real fortune. The $18 million. The legacy. I logged into the secure server. The interface was stark simple. The numbers on the screen were staggering. $17,500,000. I looked at the transfer options. I could move it to another trust. I could freeze it, but I had a better idea. I wanted them to see it. I wanted them to think they had won. And then I wanted them to open the box and find nothing but dust. I initiated a new transfer, destination, the United Negro College Fund and the St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. Two charities I had supported quietly for years. I typed in the amount, $17,499,500. I left exactly $500 in the account, just enough to keep it open. Just enough so that when the bank printed the statement, it wouldn't say closed. It would say $500, the price of a cheap suit, the price of a bad night out, the price of my family's loyalty. My finger hovered over the execute button. This was it. My life's work. The safety net I had built for generations. I was giving it away. I was burning the kingdom to save my soul. I thought about the baby that never was. I thought about the grandson I would never hold. I thought about Trey's face when he lied to me at the lake. I pressed the button. The screen buffered for a second, a little spinning wheel of doom, and then a green check mark appeared. Transfer complete. It was done. I was no longer a millionaire. I was just an old man with a house full of snakes and $500 to his name. I felt a weight lift off my shoulders so massive I almost floated out of the chair. They couldn't kill me for my money anymore because I didn't have any. They were plotting a murder for an empty treasure chest. But the trap wasn't finished yet. I needed to make sure they didn't find out until the very last second. I needed them to walk onto that stage tomorrow night, believing they were the richest people in Chicago. I picked up my phone and texted Luther. The retirement fund is gone. Trey stole it. I just moved the big pot. It is all gone, Luther. Every dime. The accounts are empty, Luther replied instantly. Are you safe, Ike? Do you want me to send security now? No, I typed back. Let them sleep. Let them have their sweet dreams. I want to see their faces when the check bounces. Bring the police tomorrow. Bring the DA. And Luther, bring popcorn. I closed the laptop. I wiped my fingerprints off the desk. I stood up and walked to the window. The sun was starting to rise over the skyline, painting the city in hues of blood orange and bruised purple. It was going to be a beautiful day for a party. I went back upstairs, moving quietly past their bedrooms. I could hear Trey snoring. He was sleeping the sleep of the wicked, thinking his debts were paid. He didn't know he had just bought a one-way ticket to federal prison. I went into my room and lay down on the bed next to Vanessa. She stirred in her sleep, her hand instinctively going to her stomach, checking for the fake bump she wasn't wearing. I looked at her sleeping face. She looked so peaceful, so innocent. It was a mask she wore even in her dreams. I closed my eyes, but I didn't sleep. I lay there counting the minutes, counting the millions I had just given away. And for the first time in a long time, I felt rich. I had my dignity, I had my life, and tomorrow I was going to have my justice. The trap was set, the bait was taken, and the steel jaws were wide open, waiting for the first step. Saturday arrived with a sky so blue it felt like an insult to the storm brewing inside my house. The sun was shining, the birds were singing, and my backyard had been transformed into a set for a reality TV show about people with more money than sense. Courtney had outdone herself. She had taken the $50,000 deposit I gave her and burned through it in 48 hours. I stood at my bedroom window looking down at the spectacle. There were tents made of white silk billowing in the breeze. There were archways of flowers, imported orchids, and white roses that cost more per stem than I used to make in an hour. There was a string quartet tuning their instruments in the gazebo. There were waiters in white tuxedos carrying silver trays. It was obscene. It was a coronation for a prince who did not exist, paid for by a king they were planning to assassinate. I put on my best suit. It was a charcoal gray three-piece I had bought in Italy 10 years ago. It fit a little looser now, but I still looked like a man who commanded respect. I fastened my cufflinks, my hands steady. The fear was gone. The hesitation was gone. Today was the day I burned it all down. I walked downstairs. The house was buzzing with activity. Caterers were running back and forth with trays of lobster and caviar. Courtney was in the center of the living room, barking orders at a poor florist who looked terrified. "No, the blue hydrangeas go on the left," Courtney snapped, pointing a manicured finger. "The pink peonies go on the right. We need balance. And where is the champagne tower? I wanted it by the entrance." She turned and saw me. For a second, her mask slipped and I saw the annoyance. She didn't want me here. She wanted me in the ground. But she plastered a smile on her face so fast it was almost impressive. "Ike, you look dashing," she said, walking over and adjusting my tie. "Are you ready for your big day? Everyone is coming. The mayor is coming. My partners from the firm are coming." She was listing the people she wanted to impress, the people she wanted to witness her ascendancy to the throne of the Jefferson estate. "I am ready," I said, my voice grave. "Is Luther here?" "He is on his way," she assured me. "With the papers. Don't worry about a thing. Just relax and enjoy the party." Just then, Vanessa appeared at the top of the stairs. She paused for effect, waiting for us to look at her. She was wearing a flowing pastel gown that clung to her curves, and her stomach. It was massive. She had padded the prosthetic. It looked like she had jumped forward 2 months and 2 days. It was grotesque. She placed a hand on the banister and one hand on her lower back, descending the stairs with a heavy waddle-like step, grimacing as if every movement was a struggle. "Oh, my back," she groaned theatrically as she reached the bottom. "Junior is heavy today. He is kicking up a storm." She reached out for me and I took her hand. Her skin was warm, alive, betraying the cold, dead thing she carried under her dress. "You look beautiful, V," I lied. "Thank you, baby," she cooed, leaning into me. "I am doing this for us. I want everyone to see how happy we are." We walked out into the garden. The guests were starting to arrive. It was a strange mix of people. On one side there were my people, old union guys with rough hands and ill-fitting suits men. I had walked picket lines with men who had driven trucks for me for 30 years. They looked uncomfortable amidst the silk and the orchids. On the other side were Courtney's people, the sharks. Real estate developers, lawyers, social climbers with fake tans and teeth so white they looked radioactive. They were drinking my champagne and sizing up my house, calculating the square footage, wondering how soon it would be on the market. Trey was circulating, shaking hands, playing the role of the dutiful son. He was sweating profusely, wiping his forehead with a handkerchief every 30 seconds. He saw me and rushed over. "Dad, you made it out," he said, his voice high and tight. Can I get you a chair? You should sit down. You shouldn't be standing. I am fine, Trey, I said, looking him in the eye. I want to stand. I want to see everyone. Courtney appeared at my elbow holding 2 flutes of champagne. A toast, she said, her voice commanding. Just the family. Before the madness starts. She handed a glass to Trey, one to Vanessa, and held one out to me. For you, Ike, she said. I had the waiter bring this one especially for you. It is the vintage reserve. My internal alarm bells started ringing so loud I thought everyone could hear them. The vintage reserve. Especially for me. I looked at the glass. The bubbles rose in a frantic dance. It looked just like the others, but I knew better. This was the primer. This was the dose that would make me sleepy, make me pliable, maybe weaken my heart just enough so that the final dose tonight would finish the job without a struggle. Thank you, Courtney, I said, taking the glass. To family, she said, raising her glass. To the future. To the future, Vanessa echoed, touching her glass to mine. I raised the glass to my lips. I saw them watching. Courtney's eyes were locked on my throat. Vanessa had stopped breathing. Trey was looking at his shoes. I pretended to stumble. My cane hit the edge of a passing waiter's tray. I lurched forward, crying out in mock alarm. Whoops, I shouted. In the confusion, I lowered my glass and bumped into the waiter, spilling half of the champagne onto his jacket. Oh, I am so sorry, I exclaimed, grabbing a napkin from the tray and dabbing at the man's suit. Clumsy old man, I am so sorry. Here, let me take that, sir, the waiter said, reaching for my glass. No, I insisted, turning my back to Courtney and Vanessa for a split second. I kept my glass, but in that singular moment of chaos, I switched it with an empty glass. I swiped from the passing tray of dirty dishes the busboy was holding right next to me. It was a move I had learned playing 3-card Monte on the street corners of Chicago 60 years ago. I turned back to them, holding the empty glass. What a waste, I said, shaking my head. I spilled it all. Courtney looked furious. Her jaw was clenched tight. It is fine, she snapped. I will get you another one. No, I said, patting my stomach. Maybe it is a sign. My stomach is still settling from yesterday. I will stick to water until the announcement. I saw the disappointment flash in her eyes, but she couldn't force it down my throat in front of 200 people. Fine, she said. Water. But you need to be ready. The speeches start in 20 minutes. I walked away from them, moving through the crowd. I shook hands with my old friends. Ike, you look good. One of my old drivers, Big Sal said. But this party, it ain't your style, boss. Too much fluff. I squeezed his shoulder. You are right, Sal. It isn't my style. But stick around. The entertainment is going to be something special. I made my way to the front of the garden where a massive stage had been erected. Behind the podium was a gigantic LED screen, the kind they use at rock concerts. Courtney had rented it to display a montage of family photos and then the big reveal, a video of blue or pink fireworks exploding. I walked around the back of the screen. A technician was sitting there at a control board looking bored. Everything set, I asked him. Yes, sir, Mr. Jefferson, he said. The video file you sent over is queued up. As soon as you give the signal, I hit play. You remember the signal I asked. When you say, let's see the future. I hit the button, he confirmed. Good man, I said, slipping a $100 bill into his pocket. Do not let anyone else touch that board. Not my son, not his wife, no one. You got it, boss. I walked back out. The sun was starting to set, casting long shadows across the lawn. The garden lights flickered on, bathing everything in a soft golden glow. It looked magical. It looked like a fairy tale. Luther arrived. He walked through the crowd like a battleship cutting through waves. He was carrying his briefcase. He saw me and nodded. He positioned himself near the stage, flanked by 2 men who looked like they played linebacker for the Bears. They weren't caterers. They were off-duty police officers Luther had hired as private security. Courtney was running around gathering everyone. It is time, she shouted, clapping her hands. Everyone to the stage. It is time for the big announcement. The crowd moved towards the stage, a sea of expensive perfumes and murmured anticipation. Vanessa waddled up the stairs to the stage, Trey helping her every step of the way. She stood in the center, rubbing her belly, beaming at the crowd. Courtney grabbed the microphone. Welcome, everyone, she boomed, her voice amplified across the garden. Thank you for coming to celebrate this miracle. We are so happy to share this moment with you. But before we find out if it is a boy or a girl, the patriarch of our family, Isaiah Jefferson, has a few words. She handed the microphone to me. She smiled, but her eyes were hard. "Make it good, Ike," she whispered, "and then sign the papers." I took the microphone. I looked out at the sea of faces. I saw my friends. I saw the strangers. I saw the loan shark that Fox had identified standing in the back near the buffet looking impatient. I looked at Trey. He was pale, sweating, looking like he was about to vomit. I looked at Vanessa. She was posing chin-up, hands on the fake bump. I looked at Courtney. She was practically vibrating with greed. I took a deep breath. The night air was cool. Friends, family, guests. I began my voice strong and steady, no longer the raspy whisper of a dying man. "You are all here to witness a revelation. You think you are here to see if my wife is having a boy or a girl. You think you are here to celebrate new life." I paused. The crowd went silent. "But I'm afraid there has been a misunderstanding. Today is not about the future. Today is about the truth." Courtney frowned. She took a half step towards me. "For 40 years I built a business on transparency," I continued, on looking a man in the eye and shaking his hand. "But lately my house has been filled with shadows." "Dad, what are you doing?" Trey hissed from behind me. I ignored him. "My wife Vanessa tells me she is carrying my legacy. My son Trey tells me he is protecting my interests. My daughter-in-law Courtney tells me she is building a future for this family." I turned to look at them. But lies, no matter how expensive they are, no matter how well-dressed they are still lies. "Ike, stop," Vanessa said, her smile wavering. "You are confusing everyone." "I am not confused, Vanessa," I said, my voice dropping to a growl. "I have never been more clear." I turned back to the crowd. I was told by my doctor that I needed to run. I was told by my lawyer that I needed to hide. But I don't run. I don't hide. I fight. Courtney lunged for the microphone. "Cut the mic," she screamed at the sound guy. But the sound guy worked for me. He cranked the volume up. "You want to reveal?" I shouted, my voice booming over the speakers. "You want to see what is inside this family?" I pointed at the screen behind me. "Let's see the future." The screen flickered to life, but it wasn't pink smoke. It wasn't blue balloons. The video started playing. It was crisp. It was clear. It was the footage from my bedroom. Vanessa walked onto the screen wearing her robe. The crowd gasped. On the giant screen 50 feet wide, Vanessa opened her robe. She reached behind her back, and in high definition for 200 people to see, she peeled the silicone belly off her body and threw it onto the bed. The silence in the garden was absolute. It was the silence of a bomb exploding before the sound hits you. On the screen, Vanessa's voice rang out clear and laughing. "The old fool is so desperate for a legacy he sees what he wants to see." In the garden, the real Vanessa let out a scream that sounded like an animal dying. She tried to cover her belly, but it was too late. Everyone was looking. Everyone saw the lie. I turned to Courtney. She was frozen, her mouth open, staring at the screen where she had just walked into the frame. "We need the big money. We need access to the trust." The video continued. "Tomorrow I'm going to tell him the stress of the legal stuff is bad for his health." And then I tripled the dose. A massive heart attack in his sleep. The crowd erupted. People were shouting. My old union buddies were surging forward. The loan shark in the back dropped his plate. I looked at my family. They were shrinking. They were dissolving under the light of the truth. This I said into the microphone, my voice cutting through the chaos. "This is the face of my family. There is no baby. There is no legacy. There is only greed and murder." I dropped the microphone. It hit the stage with a thud that felt like a gavel coming down. And then the sirens started. The button was cold under my thumb. It was a small piece of plastic, a simple remote control, but in that moment it felt heavier than a gold bar. It felt like the trigger of a loaded gun pointed directly at the heart of the deception that had rotted my life from the inside out. I looked out at the sea of faces. 200 people. The cream of Chicago society mixed with the grit of the union halls. They were all smiling. They were all holding their breath, waiting for pink balloons or blue smoke. They were waiting for a celebration of life. I pressed the button. The giant LED screen behind me flickered. The crowd leaned in a collective gasp of anticipation rising from the garden. They were expecting a generic happy ending to a fairy tale. Instead, the speakers crackled with a sound that made everyone jump. It wasn't music. It wasn't a lullaby. It was the sound of a zipper. The image on the screen resolved instantly. It was crystal clear, high-definition footage shot from the hidden camera in my bedroom. The date and time stamp in the corner showed it was from just a few days ago. The crowd went silent, confused. They saw Vanessa, their gracious hostess, standing in her bedroom. But she wasn't the glowing maternal figure standing next to me on the stage. She was wearing a silk robe, her face twisted in annoyance. On the screen, 50 feet wide and towering over the garden, Vanessa untied her robe. She let it fall open. A murmur of confusion rippled through the guests. Was this some kind of avant-garde birth video? Was it a mistake? Then the on-screen Vanessa reached behind her back. She unclasped a strap. She dug her fingers into the side of her stomach, and with a wet, peeling sound that was amplified by the concert-grade speakers, she ripped her belly off. The gasp that tore through the crowd wasn't one of joy. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated horror. It was the sound of 200 people realizing they were witnessing something obscene. On the screen, the silicone prosthetic hit the bed with a rubbery bounce. It lay there, a hollow shell of flesh-colored plastic. The Vanessa on the screen scratched her flat, non-pregnant stomach and sighed with relief. "Damn thing itches like hell," the digital Vanessa complained, her voice booming across the silent garden. I looked at the real Vanessa standing next to me. She had stopped breathing. Her hands were frozen on her padded stomach, clutching the lie she was currently wearing. Her face had drained of all color, leaving her looking like a wax statue. She was staring up at the screen, her mouth opening and closing like a fish pulled out of water, but no sound came out. She was watching her own soul being laid bare. But the video wasn't done. The visual was damning, but the audio was the execution. Courtney walked into the frame on the screen. The crowd shifted, turning their eyes to the real Courtney standing on the stage. She looked like she had been struck by lightning. Her eyes were wide, fixed on the giant image of herself. On the screen, the two women began to talk. "Did he buy it?" Courtney asked. Hook, line, and sinker Vanessa laughed. "The old fool is so desperate for a legacy he sees what he wants to see." A low rumble of anger started in the crowd. My union guys, the men who had known me for 40 years, started stepping forward. They didn't like seeing their friend called a fool. They didn't like seeing a good man mocked. "We need the big money," the on-screen Courtney hissed. "We need access to the trust." "Did the old man sign the new will yet?" The real Courtney let out a strangled cry. She lunged toward the technician's booth, waving her arms. "Turn it off," she screamed. "Turn it off, right now. It is a deep fake. It is AI. Turn it off." But the technician, enjoying the $100 tip I had given him, sat with his arms crossed, watching the show. The video cut to the most damning part, the part about the poison. "Tomorrow I am going to tell him the stress of the legal stuff is bad for his health," Vanessa said on the screen, admiring herself in the mirror. And then I tripled the dose, a massive heart attack in his sleep. Clean, simple, tragic. The word tragic hung in the air, echoing off the sides of my house. The reaction was instantaneous. A woman in the front row dropped her champagne glass. It shattered, but the sound was swallowed by the roar of the crowd. People were shouting, some were pointing. The lone shark in the back the man Fox had identified looked furious, realizing his payday had just evaporated into thin air. Vanessa let out a wail that didn't sound human. She grabbed the podium for support, her knees buckling. She looked at me, her eyes filled with terror. "Ike," she whispered. "Ike, please. It is not real. It is a trick." I looked at her with zero pity. The woman who had planned to stop my heart was now watching hers break. "It is real, Vanessa," I said, my voice amplified by the microphone I was still holding. "It is the realest thing you have ever done." Courtney wasn't crying. Courtney was attacking. She realized her life was collapsing and she went into survival mode. She rushed at me, her face contorted into a mask of pure hate. "Give me that," she shrieked, reaching for the microphone. "He is lying. He is senile. He has dementia. Don't listen to him. He doctored the video. He is sick." She grabbed my arm, her nails digging into my suit jacket. She tried to wrestle the mic from my hand. She was younger than me, faster than me, and fueled by the adrenaline of a cornered rat. "Stop him!" she yelled at the crowd. "Someone call an ambulance. He is having an episode. He doesn't know what he is doing." For a second, just a split second, I saw hesitation in the faces of the strangers. The real estate developers, the socialites, they didn't know me. They saw an old man and a hysterical younger woman. Maybe they thought she was right. Maybe they thought I had lost my mind. But I hadn't lost my mind. And I hadn't lost my strength. I had spent the last 2 days purging her poison from my system. I was the man who had loaded trucks until my hands bled. I was the man who had built an empire. I didn't let go of the mic. Instead, I planted my feet. I looked Courtney in the eye. "Get your hands off me," I growled. I swept my arm out, a powerful, decisive motion. I shoved her back. She wasn't expecting the strength. She stumbled in her high heels, her arms flailing, and fell hard onto the stage floor. The crowd gasped again. I adjusted my jacket. I stood tall. I looked at the crowd, my gaze steady and clear. I am not senile, I boomed into the microphone. I am not confused. And I am certainly not the one who needs a doctor. I turned back to the screen. Tech, I said calmly. The next slide, please. The video of the bedroom vanished. In its place, a document appeared. It was blown up to massive proportions so that everyone, even the people standing in the back by the buffet, could read it. It was a medical record. It had the seal of a hospital in Ohio. It had a patient's name, Vanessa Lewis. And it had a date from 5 years ago. Courtney was scrambling to her feet, her hair a mess, her dress twisted. She looked at the screen and froze. She knew what it was. She knew the game was over. Vanessa saw it too. She let out a whimper and covered her face with her hands. I pointed my cane at the screen, tracing the bold black letters under the procedure summary. Total abdominal hysterectomy, I read aloud. I turned to Vanessa. She was shaking so hard the stage was vibrating. For those of you who did not go to medical school, I continued, my voice dripping with cold sarcasm. That means the surgical removal of the uterus. I walked over to Vanessa. I stood inches from her. I could smell her fear. It smelled sour, like spoiled milk. Look at me, Vanessa, I commanded. She didn't move. She kept her hands over her face. I said, look at me, I roared. She slowly lowered her hands. Her makeup was running. Her eyes were red. She looked like a ghost. How, Vanessa? I asked, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper that the microphone picked up perfectly. How can you be 3 months pregnant? How can you be carrying my son? How can there be a heartbeat when you don't even have a womb? She opened her mouth, but no words came out. She looked down at her stomach, the padded fake stomach that had fooled me for months. Tell them, I shouted, gesturing to the crowd. Tell my friends, tell my business partners, tell the world how you performed a medical miracle. Or tell them the truth. Tell them you bought that belly at a costume shop. Vanessa started to hyperventilate. She was trapped. There was no lie big enough to cover this. There was no spin. The medical record was 50 feet wide behind her. She stammered. Courtney stepped in front of her, trying to shield her, trying to salvage the wreckage. This is a violation of privacy, she screamed at the crowd. This is illegal. You cannot show medical records. We will sue you. We will take everything you have. I laughed. It was a harsh barking sound. Sue me, I asked. With what money, Courtney? The money you thought you were going to inherit tonight. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I held it up. While you were planning the nursery, I continued addressing the crowd but keeping my eyes on Courtney while you were picking out Ferraris. I was moving money. I turned back to the screen. Check the balance sheet, please. The medical record disappeared. A screenshot of a bank statement appeared. It showed a transfer of $17 million, destination charity, remaining balance $500. Trey, who had been standing in the shadows of the stage, paralyzed by fear, let out a noise that sounded like a dying animal. He fell to his knees. It is gone, I said. It is all gone. I gave it away. I gave it to people who actually need it. People who don't try to murder their fathers. Courtney stared at the screen. Her eyes were bulging. Her mouth was a rictus of horror. The money, the goal, the reason for everything. It had evaporated. You old bastard, she whispered. You burned it. I didn't burn it, I said. I purified it. I looked at the three of them. My wife clutching her fake belly. My son on his knees weeping for his lost inheritance. My daughter-in-law looking like she wanted to tear my throat out with her teeth. And now, I said, looking towards the entrance of the garden where blue and red lights were starting to flash against the white tents. I think there are some people here who want to congratulate you on your performance. The sirens wailed, getting louder and louder, cutting through the murmurs of the crowd. The police are here, I said. And I don't think they are here for the cake. Vanessa looked at the flashing lights. She looked at me. And then she did the only thing she had left. She ran. She hiked up her pastel dress and bolted for the side of the stage, trying to disappear into the crowd. But she forgot one thing. She was wearing a 10-pound silicone belly and 6-inch heels. She took 2 steps, tripped over a microphone cable, and went down. She fell hard face first onto the wooden planks of the stage. And as she hit the ground, the strap of the prosthetic snapped. The fake belly, the miracle child, the heir to the Jefferson Empire, popped out from under her dress. It rolled across the stage like a loose basketball, bouncing once, twice, before coming to a rest at the feet of the loan shark, who had pushed his way to the front. The crowd erupted. It wasn't shock anymore. It was pandemonium. People were screaming. Phones were flashing. I stood over the silicone belly. I looked at it. Well, I said into the microphone, "It looks like it's a boy. A bouncing baby rubber boy." I looked at Courtney. She wasn't running. She was staring at the police officers who were now sprinting across the lawn, led by Luther. "Game over, Courtney," I said. She looked at me. Her eyes filled with a hatred so pure it was almost impressive. "This isn't over, Ike," she hissed. "Oh, it is over," I replied. "The only thing left is the sentencing." I dropped the mic. It hit the stage with a thud that felt like a gavel coming down. The show was over. The trap had snapped shut, and the rats were caught. The garden was in chaos. The air was thick with the murmurs of 200 people trying to process the impossible reality they had just witnessed. Vanessa was still on the floor, a heap of pastel silk and shame sobbing into her hands. Courtney was standing over her, looking around frantically, her eyes darting like a trapped animal searching for an exit that didn't exist. But I wasn't done. Not yet. There was one more rat in the trap, one more betrayal that needed to be dragged out into the light. I turned my gaze to Trey. My son was standing in the shadows of the stage, his back pressed against a support beam as if he were trying to merge with the wood and disappear. He looked like a man who had just watched a firing squad line up and realized he was next. His face was slick with sweat, his expensive suit stained with dark patches of fear. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at the ground, at his shoes, at anything but the father he had sold out. I walked over to him. My cane tapped a steady, ominous rhythm on the wooden planks of the stage. The sound cut through the noise of the crowd, silencing them again. They knew the show wasn't over. They knew the old man had more to say. "Trey," I said, my voice low but amplified by the microphone so that it boomed across the garden. "Look at me." He flinched. He shook his head slightly, a pathetic, childlike refusal. "I said, look at me," I roared. He slowly lifted his head. His eyes were red-rimmed with panic and tears. I looked into them, searching for the boy I had raised, the boy I had taught to ride a bike, the boy I had bailed out of every mistake he had ever made. He wasn't there. There was only a stranger. A weak, greedy stranger who had decided my life was worth less than his comfort. "You thought you could hide behind the women, didn't you?" I asked him, keeping my voice steady. "You thought if you let Vanessa play the nurse and Courtney play the mastermind, your hands would stay clean. You thought you were just the innocent son caught in the middle." I took a step closer. "But we both know that isn't true, Trey. We both know you are the one who opened the door." Trey's lip quivered. "Dad, please," he whispered, his voice cracking. "Don't do this. Not here. Tech," I called out without taking my eyes off my son. "Play clip number 3. The giant screen behind us flickered again. The image of the medical record vanished. In its place, a new video appeared. It was grainy black and white footage. It was from the security camera in my home office. I had installed it years ago not to spy on my family but to protect my business records. I had forgotten it was there until Fox reminded me. And Trey had clearly forgotten it too. The video showed my office. It was late at night. The date stamp in the corner was from 2 weeks ago. The door opened slowly and Trey walked in. He looked nervous. He looked over his shoulder, checking the hallway. Then he walked straight to my desk. On the screen, 50 feet wide, the crowd watched as my son sat in my chair. He opened my top drawer. He pulled out a checkbook. My checkbook. He placed it on the desk. Then he pulled a piece of paper from his pocket. It was a document with my signature on it. He smoothed it out. He picked up a pen. And then for 10 agonizing minutes, the video showed my son practicing my signature. Over and over again. He would sign a scrap of paper, compare it to the document, crumple it up, and try again. He was focused. He was determined. He stuck his tongue out the corner of his mouth, a habit he had since he was 6 years old when he was concentrating on a drawing. But he wasn't drawing a picture for the refrigerator. He was perfecting a felony. Finally on the screen, he seemed satisfied. He tore a check out of the book. He wrote on it carefully. He signed it with a flourish. He held it up to the light, smiling, a smile of pure, unadulterated greed. Then he slipped the check into his pocket, put the checkbook back, and crept out of the room. The video froze on that final image of him leaving the check in his pocket, the smile on his face. The silence in the garden was different this time. It wasn't shock. It was disgust. It was the sound of 200 people losing all respect for a man they thought they knew. I looked at the real Trey. He was shaking so hard his teeth were chattering. He looked like he was going to collapse. $500,000, I said into the microphone. That was the amount on the check, wasn't it, Trey? My retirement fund. The money I set aside for rainy days. You stole it. You forged my name and you stole it while I was sleeping in the next room. Dad, I had to. Trey stammered, tears streaming down his face. I didn't have a choice. You didn't have a choice, I repeated, my voice rising. You didn't have a choice to not steal from your father. You didn't have a choice to not commit a federal crime. I stepped closer, invading his personal space. Tell me, Trey, how much did you sell me for? What was the price of your father's life? Was it $500,000? Was that enough to pay off your gambling debts? Was that enough to keep your precious white wife in designer shoes? Courtney flinched at the mention of her name, her head snapping up. She glared at me, but she didn't speak. She knew she was drowning, and anything she said would just pull her under faster. Trey sobbed. It wasn't for shoes, Dad. I owe people, bad people. They were going to kill me. And so you decided to kill me instead? I asked, my voice cold as ice. You decided my life was the currency you would use to buy yours. He didn't answer. He couldn't answer, because it was the truth. But you promised them something else, didn't you? I continued. You promised them more. I heard you on the phone at the lake, Trey. I heard you tell them you would have the rest of the money by Sunday, by tomorrow. I turned to the crowd again, scanning the faces in the back. You told them the old man was ready to die. You told them the inheritance was a done deal. You promised them my legacy. I pointed my cane toward the back of the garden near the buffet tables where a large man in a cheap suit had been watching the proceedings with a scowl. Well, Trey, I said, since you invited all my friends, I thought I would invite one of yours. The crowd turned to look where I was pointing. The large man stepped forward. He didn't look like a guest. He looked like a debt collector. He looked like a man who broke bones for a living. Fox had identified him as Big Mike, a collector for the syndicate Trey was involved with. I had sent him an invitation myself with a note saying that his payment would be available in cash at the party. Big Mike stared at Trey. He didn't smile. He just crossed his arms over his massive chest and nodded slowly. It wasn't a friendly nod. It was a promise. Trey saw him. The color drained from his face so completely I thought he was having a stroke. His eyes bulged. He let out a whimper that was audible over the microphone. No, he whispered. No, no, no. He knows, Trey, I said softly into the mic. He knows there is no money. He knows the accounts are empty. He knows you lied to him, just like you lied to me. Trey's knees finally gave out. He collapsed onto the stage floor, falling into a heap at my feet. He grabbed the hem of my trousers, sobbing uncontrollably. Dad, Dad, please, you have to help me. They are going to kill me. They are going to cut me up. Please, Dad, I am your son. I looked down at him, this broken, weeping man, this man who had plotted to stop my heart, this man who had looked me in the eye and told me it was okay to die. I felt a pang of pity, but it was distant, like watching a stranger in a movie. The love I had for him, the fierce, protective love of a father, had been burned away by the truth. I tried to help you, son, I said, my voice heavy with sadness. I helped you your whole life. I gave you money. I gave you businesses. I gave you a home. And what did you do with it? You threw it away. And when you ran out, you decided to throw me away too. I pulled my leg away from his grasp. I am not your father anymore, Trey. I am just the victim of your crime. And I don't negotiate with criminals. Trey wailed, burying his face in his hands. I was forced. Courtney made me do it. She said it was the only way. She said you were old, that you wouldn't mind. He was pointing a shaking finger at his wife, throwing her under the bus in a desperate attempt to save himself. Courtney's face twisted into a mask of pure fury. She wasn't scared of the loan shark. She wasn't scared of the police. She was furious that her puppet had cut his strings. She marched across the stage, her heels clicking like gunshots. She stood over Trey, looking down at him with absolute contempt. "Shut up!" she screamed. "Shut up, you spineless coward!" Trey looked up at her, tears streaming down his face. "You did this. You planned it all. You said he had to die." Courtney didn't hesitate. She drew back her hand and slapped him. It was a vicious cracking sound that echoed through the microphone I was still holding. Trey's head snapped back. "You are useless," she shrieked, hitting him again. "Useless, I told you to handle him. I told you to be a man, and look at you." Crying on the floor like a baby, she kicked him in the ribs. Stand up, and fix this." The crowd gasped. The police officers who had been waiting in the wings started to move in. I watched them. My family, my legacy, a sobbing thief and a violent shrew tearing each other apart on a stage paid for with my money. It was the ugliest thing I had ever seen, and it was the most beautiful justice I could have asked for. I stepped back, giving them space to destroy each other. "Fix it," I asked Courtney, my voice calm over the speakers. "There is nothing to fix, Courtney. It is broken. It is all broken. And you broke it." Courtney spun around to face me, her chest heaving, her eyes wild. "You think you have won, old man?" she hissed, not caring about the microphone anymore. "You think this is over? You have nothing. You gave it all away. You are just as broke as we are." I smiled, a slow, genuine smile. Maybe I said, "But I am free. And in about 2 minutes you are going to be in handcuffs. So I guess I win." Trey was still on the floor weeping, curled into a ball. Courtney was standing over him, vibrating with rage. Vanessa was still face down on the wood. And then I saw the blue uniforms ascending the stairs. The party was over. The cleanup was about to begin. The garden had gone silent again, but this time it was not the silence of shock or disgust. It was the silence of held breath, the kind that comes right before a clap of thunder. Trey was huddled on the floor, a broken man weeping into his hands. Vanessa was a statue of misery beside the fallen silicone belly. But Courtney was vibrating. She was standing alone in the center of the stage, isolated by her own venom, and I could see the gears in her mind grinding to a halt. She looked at the giant screen where the evidence of her crimes was still frozen. She looked at the crowd of people who were now looking at her not with envy, but with revulsion. She looked at the police officers moving methodically up the stairs, their hands resting on their holsters. And finally she looked at me. Her eyes were not human in that moment. They were black holes. The blue glass had shattered, leaving only a dark void of pure, unadulterated madness. She had lost. The money was gone. The reputation she had carefully crafted was incinerated. Her husband was a useless puddle on the floor. Her future was a concrete cell. She let out a sound that started as a laugh but ended as a scream. It was a jagged, broken noise that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. "You think you are smart, old man?" She spat, her voice trembling with a rage so potent it felt like heat radiating across the stage. "You think you can just give it all away? You think you can leave me with nothing?" I gripped my cane tighter, planting my feet. I didn't back down. I wasn't afraid of her. I had already faced the worst she could do. "It wasn't yours to begin with, Courtney," I said, my voice steady. "You bet on a horse that wasn't running, and you lost." She took a step toward me. Her hands were opening and closing, twitching. She looked wild. Her perfectly styled hair was coming loose, strands falling across her face. Her designer dress was twisted. She looked like a queen whose kingdom had just burned to the ground. "I worked for this," she hissed, stepping closer. "I put up with your stupid son. I put up with your boring stories. I put up with this whole pathetic family for years. I earned that money. It is mine." "You earned a prison sentence," I replied coldly, "and that is the only thing you are going to get." The police officers were closer now, just a few feet away. One of them raised a hand. "Ma'am, stay where you are. Put your hands up." Courtney didn't listen. She didn't even acknowledge them. Her focus was entirely on me. She was a missile locked onto a target, and her guidance system was broken. She looked to her right. On a small table draped in white linen sat the cake, the gender reveal cake. A massive, 3-tiered confection covered in white fondant waiting to be cut to reveal a pink or blue sponge that no one cared about anymore. Beside the cake on a silver platter lay the ceremonial knife. It wasn't a butter knife. It was a heavy, silver-plated blade with a serrated edge and a pearl handle, sharp enough to cut through fondant, sharp enough to cut through skin. Courtney's eyes locked onto it. I saw the thought form in her head. I saw the desperate, insane calculation. If she couldn't have the money, she would take the blood. If she couldn't win, she would make sure I lost. "No," I shouted, raising my hand. But she was faster. She was fueled by the adrenaline of a cornered animal. She lunged for the table. Her hand snatched the knife, the silver flashing under the stage lights. She spun around. She didn't run away. She didn't try to escape the police. She ran at me. She moved with a speed that defied logic. Before the officers could close the gap, before Trey could even look up, she was on me. She grabbed the lapel of my suit with her left hand, yanking me forward. I stumbled, my bad knee buckling, and then I felt the cold, hard pressure of the serrated blade against the skin of my throat. "Don't move," she screamed, spraying saliva onto my face. "Back off, all of you, back off, or I will open him up right here," the crowd screamed. A collective wave of panic washed over the garden. The police officers froze, their weapons half drawn. "Drop the knife," one officer yelled, his voice tight. "Drop it now, I will kill him," Courtney shrieked, pressing the blade harder. I felt a sting as the serrated edge broke the skin. A warm trickle of blood ran down my neck, staining my white collar. "I will kill him." She dragged me backward, her body pressed against mine. She was shaking violently, vibrating with a chaotic energy. I could smell her. The expensive perfume had soured, mixed with the acrid scent of terror sweat. "Sign it," she hissed in my ear, her voice a guttural growl. "Sign the transfer," what I rasped, trying to keep my head tilted back away from the blade. "The house," she screamed. "The remaining assets. There has to be something. You didn't give it all away. You are a liar. You kept something. Sign it over to me." Now she was delusional. She had snapped completely. She thought she could force a signature on a cocktail napkin in the middle of a hostage situation and walk away with a fortune. "There is nothing, Courtney," I said, my voice calm despite the steel biting into my windpipe. "It is gone. It is all gone. Liar," she screamed. She jerked my head back. "Sign it. Sign the papers. You think you won? You think you beat me? I am Courtney Miller. Nobody beats me." I looked out at the crowd. They were frozen in horror. My friends, my union brothers, they looked ready to charge, but they were afraid to trigger her. Trey was still on the floor, staring up at us with wide, terrified eyes. He wasn't moving. He wasn't trying to help. He was just watching his wife hold a knife to his father's throat. "Courtney," I said softly, "look around you. There is no way out. Shut up, old man," she spat. "I am walking out of here, and I am walking out with my money." She started to drag me toward the edge of the stage, toward the stairs. She was strong, stronger than she looked, or maybe I was just tired. Tired of the fighting, tired of the betrayal, but I wasn't helpless, and I wasn't alone. I had planned this party, I had controlled every variable, and I had anticipated that a cornered rat might bite. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw movement, not from the police in uniform, but from the service staff. Two waiters who had been standing near the champagne tower quietly set down their trays. They didn't look like waiters anymore. Their posture changed, their eyes locked onto Courtney. One of them was the man I had bumped into earlier, the one whose suit I had stained. He wasn't a clumsy server. He was the head of the private security team Fox had recommended, ex-military, special forces. He moved silently, flanking us from the left. Another waiter approached from the right, moving through the shadows of the stage equipment. Courtney didn't see them. She was too focused on the police in front of her, too focused on screaming at me. "Get a car," she yelled at the officers. "Get me a car and a lawyer. Now." "Ma'am, put the knife down," the officer said, stepping forward slowly, hands raised. "We can talk about this." "Talk? I am done talking," she screamed. She raised the knife slightly, adjusting her grip, preparing to dig it in deeper. Now I shouted. It was the signal. The waiter on the left lunged. He didn't hesitate. He didn't announce himself. He moved like a blur. He grabbed Courtney's wrist, the one holding the knife, with a grip that must have felt like a hydraulic press. He twisted it violently away from my throat. Courtney screamed in pain, the sound high and piercing. At the exact same second, the waiter on the right tackled us from behind. He wrapped his arms around Courtney, pulling her away from me, breaking her hold on my jacket. I stumbled forward, falling to my knees, my hand going to my throat. Courtney was slammed to the floor of the stage. The knife clattered onto the wood, spinning away. She fought like a demon. She kicked, she bit, she scratched. She was screaming obscenities, cursing me, cursing the world, cursing the money she would never spend. "Get off me," she howled. "It is mine. It is mine." The two security guards pinned her down. One had her arm twisted behind her back in a lock that immobilized her completely. The other held her legs. "Secure the head guard," said, his voice calm, professional. "Target is neutralized." The police rushed in, then swarming the stage. They took over from my security team, pulling Courtney up roughly. They didn't treat her like a lady in a cocktail dress. They treated her like the dangerous criminal she was. They slammed her against the support beam, cuffing her hands behind her back. The click of the handcuffs was the sweetest sound I had ever heard. Luther walked onto the stage. He was flanked by the district attorney, the man who owed me a favor, the man who had been waiting in the wings with a warrant in his pocket. Luther looked at Courtney. He adjusted his glasses. He didn't look angry. He looked disappointed. "Courtney Miller," he said, his voice booming without a microphone. "You are under arrest." For what she screamed, struggling against the officers. For wanting what I deserve. For conspiracy to commit murder, Luther said, ticking the charges off on his fingers. For fraud. For identity theft. For elder abuse. And now for assault with a deadly weapon and attempted murder. The DA stepped forward. And for extortion, Mrs. Miller. We have the recordings, we have the testimony, we have the financial trail. It is over. Courtney stopped struggling. She looked at Luther, she looked at the DA, and then she looked at me. I was standing up now, leaning on my cane, wiping the blood from my neck with a handkerchief one of the guards had handed me. It was just a scratch, but it stung. She looked at me, and the madness faded just enough for the reality to sink in. She saw the ruins of her life. She saw the bars of a cell closing around her. "Ike," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Ike, please. I can explain. It was the hormones. It was the stress. I didn't mean it." I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had laughed about stopping my heart. I looked at the woman who had held a knife to my throat seconds ago. "Save it for the jury." "Courtney," I said, my voice raspy but loud. "You are going to have a lot of time to explain. About 15 to 20 years. The officers turned her around and marched her toward the stairs. She started crying then, ugly, desperate tears. She looked back at Trey, who was still on the floor watching her go. "Trey," she screamed, "do something! Help me, you coward! Help me!" Trey didn't move. He didn't speak. He just curled into a tighter ball, hiding his face from the world. They dragged her down the stairs and through the crowd. The guests parted like the Red Sea, watching in stunned silence as the bride of the evening was hauled away in handcuffs, kicking and screaming until she was shoved into the back of a squad car. I stood on the stage alone. My neck was bleeding. My heart was pounding. My family was destroyed. But as I looked out at the flashing lights reflecting off the white tents, I felt a strange sense of calm. The tumor had been cut out. It had been painful, and it had been bloody, but it was gone. I looked down at the cake knife lying on the floor. It was still shining under the lights. It had failed, just like their plan. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the cool night air. I was alive. I was 74 years old, and I had just survived an assassination attempt by my own daughter-in-law. I turned to Luther, who was standing beside me, looking concerned. "Are you okay, Ike?" he asked, looking at my neck. "I am fine, Luther," I said, pocketing the handkerchief. "Just a scratch." "And the others?" he asked, gesturing to Vanessa and Trey. I looked at them. Vanessa was sitting on a chair, guarded by an officer still sobbing into her hands. Trey was being helped up by 2 policemen, his legs wobbling like jelly. "Take them away," I said. "I don't want to see them. I don't want to hear them. Just take them away." Luther nodded. "Consider it done." I walked to the edge of the stage and sat down, dangling my legs over the side like a little boy. I watched as the police rounded up the rest of my family. I watched as the guests slowly started to leave, whispering and shaking their heads. The party was over. The confetti hadn't fallen. The cake hadn't been cut. But the truth had been revealed. And that was worth more than all the champagne in the world. The sirens were a deafening wail that cut through the cool night air, mixing with the shouts of the police and the stunned murmurs of the crowd. But for a moment my eyes were drawn away from the spectacle of Courtney being dragged toward the squad car. My attention shifted to the edge of the stage, where a flash of pastel fabric caught the light. It was Vanessa. While everyone was watching the demise of her partner in crime, my wife had decided to make her move. She was trying to disappear. She was trying to slip away into the darkness of the garden, hoping that in the chaos no one would notice the grieving pregnant widow making a quiet exit. She had hiked up the hem of her expensive gown, revealing the swollen ankles she had complained about for weeks, ankles that I now knew were perfectly fine. She scrambled down the side stairs of the stage, her movements frantic and clumsy. She hit the grass and started to run. It was a pathetic sight. She was trying to sprint in 6-inch stilettos across a manicured lawn that was soft from the evening dew. She was weighed down by the lie strapped to her midsection. She looked over her shoulder, her eyes wide with terror, scanning the crowd for a way out. She wasn't looking at me. She was looking at the gate, at the freedom that lay beyond the hedgerow. But panic makes you careless, and greed makes you heavy. She took 3 strides toward the crowd of confused socialites and angry union workers. She tried to weave between 2 tables laden with half-eaten appetizers. But her heel caught on a thick black extension cord that was snaking through the grass, powering the lights that illuminated her shame. It happened in slow motion. Her ankle twisted violently. She let out a sharp cry, a sound of pure frustration rather than pain. Her arms windmilled, trying to find balance that wasn't there. But gravity was unforgiving. She pitched forward. She didn't fall like a person. She fell like a statue toppling over. She couldn't curl up to protect herself because of the bulk around her waist. She hit the ground hard, face first into the dirt. And then came the sound. It was a wet, snapping noise followed by a hollow thud. The force of the impact had been too much for the straps holding her deception in place. The buckles snapped, the adhesive ripped away from her skin. And for the second time that night, the crowd gasped in unison. From beneath the layers of silk and chiffon, something launched itself. It wasn't a baby. It wasn't flesh and blood. It was a large, flesh-colored sphere. It ejected from her dress like a cannonball. The silicone belly hit the grass with a rubbery bounce. It rolled. It wobbled. It tumbled past an overturned vase of white roses. It rolled past the shiny black shoes of the mayor. It kept going, propelled by the momentum of her fall, until it came to a stop, right in the center of the aisle, bathed in the harsh white light of a police spotlight. It lay there on the green grass, looking like a discarded toy. It was dented on one side. The fake navel stared up at the night sky like a blind eye. The garden went deathly silent. The sirens seemed to fade into the background. 200 people stared at the object. It was undeniable. It was physical proof. It was the smoking gun lying in the dirt. Vanessa scrambled to her knees. Her dress was torn. There was mud on her face. Her hair was wild. She reached out instinctively toward her stomach, but her hands met only the flat fabric of her dress. She froze. She looked at her empty midsection. Then she looked at the silicone ball lying 10 feet away. Then she screamed. It wasn't a scream of pain. It was a scream of exposure. It was the sound of a woman who had been stripped naked in front of the world. She crawled toward the belly, dragging herself through the grass. She looked deranged. She grabbed the silicone lump and clutched it to her chest, rocking back and forth. No, she wailed. No, no, no. The crowd recoiled. People stepped back, their faces twisted in a mixture of horror and pity. This wasn't just a crime anymore. It was madness. It was a level of delusion that made you want to look away. I walked down the stairs of the stage. My cane sank slightly into the grass with each step, but I felt lighter than I had in 20 years. I walked through the parted crowd. They made way for me, looking at me with awe and sorrow. I walked until I was standing right over her. Vanessa looked up at me. Her face was streaked with mascara and dirt. She looked like a broken doll. She saw the police officers approaching from the perimeter. She saw Luther standing with his arms crossed, shaking his head. She saw the judgment in every pair of eyes staring down at her. And in that moment, her survival instinct kicked in. The same instinct that had made her target lonely old men. The same instinct that had made her fake a medical miracle. She did the only thing she knew how to do. She lied. She pointed a shaking finger toward the police car where Courtney was being shoved into the back seat. "She made me do it," Vanessa shrieked, her voice cracking. It was her idea. It was all Courtney. She scrambled to her feet, clutching the fake belly with one arm and reaching out to me with the other. "Ike, baby, please listen to me. I didn't want to do this. She forced me. She said she would kill me if I didn't help her. She said she would hurt you. I was trying to protect you, Ike. I was doing it for us." I looked at her. I looked at the woman I had shared a bed with for 10 years. The woman I had prayed with. The woman I had trusted with my heart. She was standing there holding a piece of rubber and trying to rewrite history while the ink was still wet. She threatened me. Vanessa continued the lies pouring out of her like water from a broken dam. She bought this thing. She made me wear it. She drugged you, Ike, not me. I tried to stop her. I tried to warn you. Do you remember? I tried to tell you not to sign the check. I tried to save you. It was pathetic. It was insulting. She thought I was still the blind old fool. She thought she could bat her eyelashes and cry a few tears, and I would forget the video I had just played for the world. I would forget her laughing in the bedroom about my heart attack. "She made you wear it?" I asked, my voice calm, deceptively soft. "Yes," Vanessa sobbed, nodding vigorously. "Yes, she forced me. I am a victim here, Ike. Just like you. We are victims of that monster. Please tell the police. Tell them to let me go. We can go home. We can forget this ever happened." I looked at the silicone belly she was hugging. "And the hysterectomy?" I asked. "Did she force you to have surgery 5 years ago in Ohio too? Did she force you to remove your womb before we even met?" Vanessa stopped crying instantly. Her mouth hung open. The lie died in her throat. She had forgotten about the medical records. She had forgotten that I knew everything. She stammered, looking around for a new lie, a new angle. That was a medical necessity. I didn't tell you because I didn't want you to worry, but I thought maybe there was a chance. "Stop," I said. "Just stop." I stepped closer to her. I reached out my hand. "Give me that," I said, pointing to the silicone lump. Vanessa clutched it tighter for a second, as if it were truly a child. Then, realizing how insane she looked, she slowly held it out. Her hands were shaking so hard she almost dropped it again. I took it. It was heavy. Heavier than I expected. It was warm from being pressed against her body. It felt disgusting. It felt like holding a tumor that had been cut out of my life. I held it up. I turned it over in my hands, examining the craftsmanship. It was high quality. The skin texture was realistic. It even had little veins painted on it. I looked at the crowd. They were silent, watching me. I looked at Vanessa. She was trembling, waiting for my verdict. I walked a few steps closer to the guests so everyone could see what I was holding. I held it up like Hamlet holding the skull. "So this is it," I said, my voice projecting clearly in the night air. "This is the heir to the Jefferson Empire." I squeezed the silicone. It yielded under my fingers, rubbery and lifeless. This is what I was supposed to die for. This is what my son sold his soul for. This is what my wife poisoned me for. I looked at the loan shark, Big Mike, standing in the front row. He was staring at the fake belly with a look of pure disbelief. $18 million, I said, looking at the rubber prop. That is how much they thought this was worth. $18 million for a piece of plastic bought at a costume shop. I turned back to Vanessa. "You weren't protecting me," I said, my voice hardening into stone. "You were harvesting me. You looked at me and you didn't see a husband. You saw a bank account with a pulse, and you decided the pulse was an inconvenience." "Ike, please," she whispered, sinking to her knees again. I dropped the fake belly. It landed at her feet with a dull thud. "Pick it up," I said. She looked at me confused. "Pick it up," I commanded. "It is yours. You bought it. You wore it. You keep it." She reached out and touched it, her fingers trembling. "It is the only thing you are leaving this marriage with, Vanessa," I said. "That piece of rubber, that is your settlement. That is your alimony. That is your inheritance." The police officers moved in then. They stepped past me, their faces grim. "Vanessa Lewis," one of the officers said, pulling out his handcuffs. "You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, and extortion." Vanessa screamed as they pulled her up. She tried to fight them, but she was weak with fear. They cuffed her hands behind her back. "Ike," she screamed as they dragged her away. "Ike, help me. I am your wife. I love you." I watched her go. I watched them drag her across the grass, her heels leaving deep gouges in the earth. I watched as they shoved her into the back of a second police car right next to the car where Courtney was sitting. I looked down at the silicone belly lying in the grass. It looked ridiculous now. A prop from a horror movie left behind after the credits rolled. I nudged it with my cane. It rolled over, revealing the adhesive strips on the back covered in lint and dirt. "Goodbye, Junior," I whispered. I turned away from it. I looked at the stage where my son was still huddled, a broken man waiting for his turn. The two women were gone. The masterminds were in chains. Now it was just me and the boy I had raised. I walked toward the stage, my heart heavy, but my head high. The night was not over. There was one last debt to settle, and this one was going to hurt the most. The fluorescent lights of the police station interrogation room hummed with a low electric buzz that drilled into my skull, but I welcomed the headache. It was a clean pain, a real pain. Not like the phantom pains of a fake heart attack or the stabbing agony of betrayal I had lived with for months. I sat on one side of the metal table, my hands folded calmly in front of me. On the other side, handcuffed to the chair, sat Vanessa. Through the one-way glass in the adjacent rooms, I knew Trey and Courtney were watching. They were being held separately, but Luther had arranged for them to hear this. He wanted them to hear every word. Vanessa looked like a wreck. The pastel dress was ruined, stained with dirt and grass. Her makeup was smeared across her face like a clown caught in the rain. She wasn't crying anymore. She was just staring at the table, her eyes hollow and dark. She knew the fraud charges were sticking. She knew the conspiracy charges were sticking. But she didn't know about the nail in the coffin I was about to hammer home. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a thin manila envelope. I didn't throw it. I slid it across the cold metal surface until it rested right under her nose. "Open it," I said, my voice devoid of any emotion. She looked at it warily. Her hands were cuffed in front of her, so she had to use both to awkwardly lift the flap. She pulled out a single sheet of paper. It was a lab report. She read it. I watched her eyes widen. I watched her throat move as she swallowed dry air. "Do you know what that is, Vanessa?" I asked, leaning forward slightly. She didn't answer. She couldn't. "It is a toxicology report," I continued answering for her. "From a sample of my hair and my fingernails. I had Dr. Aris take them 3 days ago when he told me to run. Do you know what they found?" She shook her head, a tiny, jerky movement. "Arsenic," I said. The word hung in the air, heavy and poisonous. Arsenic Vanessa. 5 times the lethal limit for chronic exposure. "You weren't just giving me sleeping pills, were you? You were slowly killing me. You were seasoning my morning smoothies with rat poison." "No," she whispered, her voice barely a scratch. "No, Ike. That is wrong. I wouldn't." "Stop lying," I roared, slamming my hand on the table. The sound made her jump in her chair. "Stop lying to me. The police found the bottle in your vanity. Vanessa hidden inside a container of face cream. They found it an hour ago while executing the search warrant. Your fingerprints are on it." She collapsed then. She slumped forward, her forehead hitting the metal table with a dull thud. She started to weep, a low, keening sound of absolute defeat. "Attempted murder," I said. "That is 20 years right there. You aren't going to a minimum security prison for fraud, Vanessa. You are going to a maximum security penitentiary for trying to slaughter your husband like a sick dog." I stood up and walked to the mirror. I knew Trey was on the other side. I knew he was listening. "Bring him in," I said to the guard standing by the door. A moment later, the door opened and 2 officers dragged Trey into the room. They didn't sit him down. They held him up because his legs were useless. He looked at me with eyes that were red and raw. He looked at his mother sobbing on the table. "Dad," he choked out. "Dad, please." I didn't know about the poison, I swear. I knew about the will. I knew about the money, but not the poison. "You have to believe me." I looked at him. My son, the boy I had protected from the world. "It doesn't matter what you knew, Trey," I said. "You knew enough. You knew you wanted me dead. You knew you were selling me out." Trey fell to his knees again, the officers letting him drop. "Dad, I am sorry. I am so sorry. I was desperate. The debts. They were going to kill me." "Money," I said, shaking my head. "It always comes back to money, doesn't it? That is all I was to you. A bank account, a checkbook, a signature." I walked over to him, standing over his kneeling form. "You did all this for $18 million, I said. "You destroyed our family. You tried to destroy my mind. You let your wife humiliate me. You let your stepmother poison me. All for $18 million. Trey looked up, hope flickering in his eyes. It was pathetic. Even now, facing prison, he was thinking about the money. He thought that maybe, just maybe, if he begged hard enough, if he played the victim, I would use that money to save him. He thought I would hire the best lawyers. He thought I would pay off his debts to keep him safe inside. "Is it still there, Dad?" he whispered. "The money." Courtney said. "She said you gave it away. But you didn't, right? You wouldn't. That is our legacy. That is the family money. You just moved it to protect it, right?" I looked at him and I felt a smile spread across my face. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of a man who has just detonated the bridge while standing on the other side. "You want to know about the money, Trey?" I asked. He nodded vigorously. "Yes, please. If we have the money, we can fix this. We can pay people. We can make deals." I reached into my pocket again. I pulled out my phone. I opened my banking app. I tapped the screen and held it in front of his face. "Look," I said. Trey squinted at the screen. He read the balance. $0.00. His face went slack. He blinked, trying to make the numbers change. I don't understand," he stammered. "Where is it? Where did you move it?" "I didn't move it, Trey," I said. "I donated it. Donated it," he screeched, his voice cracking. "To who?" "To the Orphanage Support Fund," I said, clearly savoring every syllable. "And to the Children's Research Hospital. I wired every single cent this morning before the party started." The confirmation came through while Courtney was holding that knife to my throat. Trey stared at me, his mouth hanging open. The reality of what I was saying was crashing down on him like a landslide. $18 million, he whispered. "You gave away $18 million. Every penny," I said. "I left $500 in the account to pay for a celebratory dinner for myself. The rest is gone. It is building schools, Trey. It is buying medicine for sick children. It is doing good in the world instead of rotting in your pocket." "No," he wailed, clutching his head. "No, you can't do that. It is my money. It is my inheritance." "It was never your money," I snapped. "It was mine. I earned it. I built it. And I decided that the best way to honor my legacy was to make sure you never got a dime of it." Courtney was dragged into the room then. She had been listening from the hallway, screaming to be let in. The officers threw her into the chair next to Vanessa. She looked wild. Her hair was matted with sweat. "You did what?" she screamed at me, straining against her handcuffs. "You gave it to orphans. Are you insane?" I looked at her, the mastermind, the architect of my misery. "I am perfectly sane, Courtney," I said. "Sane enough to know that the worst punishment I could give you wasn't prison. It was poverty." She stared at me, hate radiating from her in waves. "You are going to jail." I continued walking back and forth in front of them like a judge delivering a sentence. "All of you. Vanessa for attempted murder. You, Courtney, for conspiracy and assault. And you, Trey, for fraud and being an accomplice to all of it." I stopped and looked at Trey. "But here is the best part, son. When you get out. If you get out, you will have nothing. No house, no trust fund, no safety net. The loan sharks you owe money to. They are not going to care that you are in prison. They are going to be waiting, and you won't have a rich daddy to bail you out." Trey started to hyperventilate. He was rocking back and forth, moaning. "And you, Courtney," I said, turning to her, "you spent your whole life hunting for a golden ticket. You thought you found it in my son. You thought you found it in me. Well, guess what? You dug for gold and you hit a sewer pipe. You are going to federal prison, and you are going to go there broke. You will be scrubbing floors for 10 cents an hour." Courtney let out a scream of pure frustration. She lunged at me, but the cuffs held her back. "You old devil," she shrieked. "I hope you rot." I leaned in close to her face. "I am not the one rotting, Courtney," I said. "I am free. I have my health. I have my dignity. And I have the satisfaction of knowing that I beat you." I turned to the officers. "I am done here," I said, straightening my jacket. "You have the evidence. You have the confession. You have the motive." Officer Miller, the one who had arrested Courtney, nodded. "We have everything we need, Mr. Jefferson. We will take it from here." I walked toward the door. Behind me, the sounds of my family disintegrating filled the room. Vanessa was wailing a high-pitched sound of mourning for a life she threw away. Courtney was screaming profanities, cursing the world, cursing the orphans, cursing me. And Trey was just sobbing. A broken, weeping man who had gambled his father's life and lost everything. "Dad," he called out one last time as I reached the door. "Dad, please don't leave us like this." I stopped. I put my hand on the doorknob. I didn't turn around. "You left me a long time ago, son," I said softly. "You left me the day you decided my money was worth more than my breath." I opened the door and walked out into the hallway. The air in the station was stale, but to me it smelled like freedom. I walked past the front desk where Luther was waiting for me. "Did you tell them?" Luther asked, handing me my coat. "I told them," I said, putting it on. "And how did they take it?" "About as well as you would expect," I replied. Luther clapped me on the shoulder. "Come on, Ike, let's get out of here. I know a place that makes a great steak. Rare. Just how you like it." I smiled. "That sounds perfect, Luther." We walked out of the police station and into the cool night air. The city lights were twinkling in the distance. Somewhere out there, $18 million was already being put to work saving lives. And somewhere behind me, 3 people were sitting in a cold concrete room realizing that their greed had bought them nothing but a cage. I took a deep breath. I felt light. I felt clean. The nightmare was over, and for the first time in a long time, I was looking forward to waking up tomorrow. 6 months is a long time when you are waiting for the other shoe to drop. But when the day finally arrived, the courtroom felt small. It smelled of floor wax and stale coffee and the heavy, suffocating scent of desperation. I sat in the front row right behind the prosecutor's table. I wore the same charcoal suit I had worn the night of the party, but this time there was no blood on the collar. My hands rested on the head of my cane, steady and calm. I wasn't there to testify anymore. I had done my part. I was there to watch the end of the story. When the bailiffs brought them in, the change was startling. Prison had stripped away the varnish. Vanessa looked 20 years older. Her hair was graying at the roots, her skin sallow without the expensive creams I used to pay for. She walked with a shuffle, her head down, avoiding the eyes of the jury. Trey looked like a ghost. He had lost 30 pounds. His suit hung off him like a costume on a wire hanger. He was shaking a constant tremor that rattled the chains on his wrists. But Courtney, even in an orange jumpsuit, she tried to hold on to some shred of her arrogance. She walked with her chin up, scanning the room with those cold blue eyes, looking for an exit, looking for an angle. When she saw me, she didn't flinch. She glared. It was a look of pure, unadulterated venom. She didn't regret what she had done. She only regretted getting caught. The trial had been a spectacle, but today was the finale, the sentencing phase. The jury had already delivered the guilty verdicts. Today was the day they found out exactly how much their greed was going to cost them. But before the judge passed sentence, he allowed them to speak. He gave them one last chance to show remorse, to beg for mercy. And that is when the sharks started eating each other. Courtney stood up first. Her lawyer, a public defender who looked exhausted, tried to whisper something to her, but she brushed him off. She gripped the podium, her knuckles white. "Your Honor," she began, her voice trembling with a carefully practiced vibrato. "I am a victim here. I was manipulated. I was coerced." I watched her from my seat, marveling at the audacity. She was still trying to run the con. "My husband Trey," she continued, pointing a finger at the broken man beside her. "He is a gambling addict. He owes money to dangerous people. He told me they would kill us if we didn't get the money. I was terrified. I was acting under duress. I didn't want to hurt anyone. I just wanted to survive." She turned her gaze to Vanessa. "And her. She is a monster. She has done this before. She has a record. She knew exactly what poisons to use. She knew how to fake the pregnancy. I didn't know about the arsenic, I swear. I thought it was just sleeping pills. I thought we were just managing him. I didn't know she was trying to kill him." Vanessa's head snapped up. Her eyes went wide. The betrayal was absolute. The alliance of the Black Widows had dissolved into a puddle of accusations. Liar, Vanessa shrieked, jumping to her feet. "You bought the arsenic online? You used my credit card?" "Order," the judge shouted, banging his gavel. "Sit down, defendant." Courtney ignored her. She looked at the judge, tears streaming down her face. Tears that I knew she could summon on command. "Please, Your Honor. I am an educated woman. I have a career. I made a mistake by trusting my husband and his stepmother. I shouldn't be punished for their crimes. I just want to go home." It was a masterclass in gaslighting. She was rewriting reality, trying to paint herself as the innocent bystander in a plot she had engineered. But then it was Trey's turn. My son stood up slowly. He looked at Courtney. He looked at the woman who had promised him the world and then led him off a cliff. He listened to her blame him for everything. He listened to her call him an addict and a danger, and something inside him finally broke. "She is lying," he said, his voice hoarse and quiet. "Speak up, son," the judge said gently. "She is lying," Trey screamed, slamming his fist onto the table. The sound echoed through the courtroom, making everyone jump. She planned it all. Every single step. She found the forger. She found the loan sharks. She told me to steal the retirement fund. She told Vanessa to up the dose. Trey turned to face her, his face twisted in a rictus of hate. "You told me he was just an old man. You told me he wouldn't feel a thing. You said we deserved it. You wrote the script. Courtney, you coached us on what to say. You told Vanessa which hormones to take. You picked out the prosthetic. It was all you." He turned back to the judge, tears streaming down his face. "I am guilty. Your Honor, I stole from my father. I betrayed him. I deserve to be here. But she is the devil. She held a knife to his throat. You saw the video. You saw her. She was going to kill him right there on the stage. That wasn't duress. That was her. That was who she really is. Courtney lunged at him. She tried to scratch his face, her fingernails aiming for his eyes. The bailiffs were on her in a second, wrestling her back into her chair. You useless coward, she screamed. I should have left you in the gutter. The courtroom erupted. The jury looked horrified. The judge looked disgusted. I sat there watching them tear each other apart. It wasn't satisfying in the way I thought it would be. It was just sad. It was a tragedy of errors performed by people with no souls. They were rats in a bucket climbing over each other to escape the rising water. The judge banged his gavel until silence was restored. He looked at the three of them. He adjusted his glasses and picked up a piece of paper. I have heard enough, he said, his voice stern and final. In my 20 years on the bench, I have seen greed. I have seen violence. But I have rarely seen such a callous, calculated dismantling of a family unit. You didn't just want his money. You wanted his sanity. You wanted his life. He looked at Vanessa. Vanessa Lewis, you used your medical knowledge to slowly poison a man who trusted you. You have a history of preying on the vulnerable. You are a danger to society. For the charge of attempted murder in the first degree, I sentence you to 20 years in a federal penitentiary. Vanessa let out a low moan and slumped onto the table, burying her face in her arms. The judge turned to Courtney. Courtney Miller, you were the architect. You orchestrated a conspiracy that spanned months. You manipulated your husband and your mother-in-law. You forged documents, and when your plan failed, you resorted to violence. You held a knife to an elderly man's throat. You showed no remorse then, and you show no remorse now. For the charges of conspiracy, fraud, assault with a deadly weapon, and attempted murder, I sentence you to 15 years. Courtney's mouth fell open. 15 years. Her youth, her beauty, her ambition, it was all going to rot in a cell. She started to shake her head, mumbling, "No, no, no," over and over again. Finally, the judge looked at Trey Jefferson. You are the son. You owed your father loyalty and protection. Instead, you sold him out. You forged his signature, you stole his savings, and you stood by while these women plotted his death. However, your testimony was crucial in exposing the full extent of this conspiracy, and you are the only one who has admitted guilt. For the charges of fraud and accessory to attempted murder, I sentence you to 10 years. 10 years. My son would be 55 when he got out. He would have nothing. No father, no inheritance, no wife. The gavel came down. The sound was final. It was the period at the end of a very long, very painful sentence. Take them away, the judge ordered. The bailiffs pulled them up. They handcuffed them. The chains rattled a sound that I would remember forever. Vanessa was sobbing loudly now, a wailing sound that filled the room. Courtney was screaming, cursing the judge, cursing me, cursing the world. Trey was silent. He looked back at me one last time as they led him toward the side door. He didn't ask for help. He didn't ask for money. He just looked at me with eyes that were full of regret. He mouthed 2 words. I'm sorry. I didn't nod. I didn't smile. I just watched him go. I watched as the heavy metal door closed behind them, cutting off the sound of their screams. The courtroom began to empty. People were whispering, gathering their things. Luther leaned over to me. It is done, Ike, he said softly. They are gone. I stood up. My knees felt stiff. I leaned on my cane, taking a moment to steady myself. I didn't feel happy. Happiness wasn't the right word. You can't be happy when you have just sent your family to prison. You can't be happy when you realize that the last 10 years of your life were a lie. But I felt something else. I felt light. The weight was gone. The fear of the poison was gone. The wondering if they loved me was gone. The constant low-level anxiety of living with snakes was gone. I felt clean. I looked at the empty defense table. It was over. The house was empty. The accounts were closed. The will was rewritten. Let's go, Luther, I said, turning my back on the court. I have a steak dinner waiting for me, and I have a trip to plan. We walked out of the courtroom and into the hallway. The sun was shining through the high windows, casting beams of light onto the marble floor. I walked into the light feeling the warmth on my face. I was 74 years old. I was alone. I had $500 in my bank account and a heart that was a little battered but still beating strong. And for the first time in a long time, I was free. The day the sold sign went up on the front lawn of the house, I felt a physical weight lift off my chest that was heavier than any furniture I had ever moved. I stood in the driveway leaning on my cane and looked at the brick facade. For years I had looked at that house and seen a monument to my success. I saw the place where I had raised a son. I saw the place where I had built a life with a beautiful younger wife. But now, with the clarity that only betrayal can bring, I saw it for what it really was. It was a mausoleum. It was a gilded cage where I had been slowly poisoned and lied to. The real estate agent, a perky woman who didn't know the history of the place, handed me the check. It was for $700,000. The market was good. It wasn't $18 million, but it was clean money. It was money that didn't have the stench of arsenic or the stain of greed on it. It was enough. I didn't take a last look back. I didn't walk through the empty rooms to say goodbye to the ghosts. I just got in my truck and drove away. I drove straight to the RV dealership on the outskirts of the city. I had done my research. I knew exactly what I wanted. I pointed to the beast in the center of the showroom. It was a 45-foot luxury motorhome with a diesel engine that could climb mountains without breaking a sweat. It had a king-sized bed, a full kitchen, and a living room with leather recliners. It was a house on wheels, a house that could move, a house that could never be a trap. I bought it cash. The salesman looked at me like I was Santa Claus, but I didn't care. I handed him the keys to my truck as a trade-in. I didn't need the truck anymore. I didn't need to haul anything except myself. But a man cannot travel the world alone. Solitude is peaceful, but loneliness is a slow death. I knew I needed a companion, but I was done with humans for a while. Humans lied. Humans plotted. Humans disappointed you. I went to the city animal shelter. It was a loud, chaotic place that smelled of bleach and wet fur. I walked past the cages, looking into the eyes of the dogs. I saw a lot of jumping, barking energy. But in the back corner there was a scruffy terrier mix sitting quietly. He had wiry gray fur and one ear that stood up while the other flopped down. He looked like he had seen some things. He looked like he had been through the wars. I knelt down by the cage. The dog walked over slowly and licked my hand through the wire. He didn't ask for anything. He just offered a moment of connection. "What is his name?" I asked the volunteer. "We call him Lucky," she said. "He was found wandering on the highway. Nobody claimed him." "Lucky," I said softly. "That makes two of us." I signed the papers. I bought him a red collar and a bag of the best food they had. When I walked him out to the RV, he hopped into the passenger seat like he had been waiting for me his whole life. We hit the road the next morning. I didn't have a map. I didn't have a schedule. I just pointed the nose of the RV west and pressed the gas. We drove through the cornfields of Iowa and the plains of Nebraska. We watched the sunrise over the Badlands and the sunset over the Rockies. For the first few weeks, it was just me and Lucky. We had a routine. We woke up early, walked the trails, and sat by the fire at night. I talked to him. I told him about the business I built. I told him about the son I lost. I told him about the woman who tried to kill me. He listened, his head cocked to the side, never judging, never interrupting, never asking for a loan. It was the best therapy I could have asked for. In Colorado, I joined up with a caravan. It was a group of retired military veterans who traveled the country together. They were men from my generation, men who had served in Vietnam, men who knew what it was like to survive when the odds were against you. They welcomed me in. They didn't care about my money. They didn't care about my past. They just saw a man who respected the flag and knew how to tell a story. We parked our rigs in a circle at night, forming a steel fortress against the world. We drank cheap beer and grilled steaks over open fires. For the first time in 40 years, I felt like I belonged. I wasn't the boss. I wasn't the bank. I was just Ike. One evening in a campground outside of Moab, Utah, I was sitting by the fire throwing a ball for Lucky when a woman walked over. She was parked a few spots down in a modest, well-kept camper van. She had silver hair tied back in a bandana, and she was wearing hiking boots that had seen a lot of miles. "Is this seat taken?" she asked, pointing to the folding chair next to me. "It is free," I said. She sat down. She had a kind face, a face with lines that came from smiling, not from frowning. "I am Grace," she said, extending a hand. "I am Ike," I replied, shaking it. Her grip was firm. "That is a good dog you have there," Grace said, watching Lucky chase a rabbit in his dreams. "He is the best," I said. "He saved me." Grace laughed, a warm, genuine sound that reminded me of music. "Funny," she said. "My cat saved me." Animals are better than people sometimes. Most of the time, I corrected. We started talking. We talked until the fire burned down to embers. I learned that Grace was 70 years old. She was a retired librarian from Oregon. She had lost her husband 5 years ago to a heart attack. She didn't have much money, just a small pension and a love for the open road. She didn't ask me what I used to do. She didn't ask me how big my RV was. She asked me what books I liked. She asked me what my favorite part of the country was. She asked me who I was, not what I had. Over the next few weeks, Grace and I started traveling together. We would convoy down the highway talking on the CB radios. We hiked the canyons of Utah and the forests of Arizona. One night we went out to dinner at a roadside diner. It wasn't fancy, just burgers and fries. When the check came, I reached for it out of habit. I was used to paying for everything. I was used to buying affection. Grace put her hand over mine. "What are you doing?" she asked. "I am getting the bill," I said. "No, you are not," she said firmly. "We go Dutch. Or I treat you. You drove the lead today." I looked at her. She was serious. She was digging into her purse, pulling out a worn leather wallet. She wasn't looking at me with calculation. She wasn't wondering if she could get me to buy her a car. She just wanted to pay for her burger. I felt a lump in my throat. It was such a small thing. But after 10 years of Vanessa and Courtney, it felt like a miracle. "Grace," I said, my voice thick. "You don't have to." "I know I don't have to," she said, smiling. "I want to. I like your company, Ike. I am not here for a free meal." I let her pay. And as we walked out of that diner hand in hand, I realized that I had found something worth more than $18 million. I had found something real. Grace didn't know about the poison. She didn't know about the trial. She didn't know about the fortune I had given away, and she didn't care. She loved me because I made her laugh. She loved me because I was kind to her cat. She loved me because when she looked at me, she saw a man, not a mark. Life was good. Life was simple. But the past has a way of trying to claw its way back in, just when you think you have escaped. We were parked in a campground in New Mexico, watching the sunset paint the desert in shades of gold and fire. I was cleaning my fishing gear, preparing for a trip to the river the next day. A mail carrier truck pulled up to the main office. The camp host came walking over to my RV holding a bundle of letters. Luther forwarded my mail to wherever I was parked once a month. "Here you go," Ike the host said. "Looks like mostly bills and junk." I thanked him and took the stack. I sifted through it. Bank statements. A letter from the orphanage thanking me again for the donation with a picture of the new library wing they were building. That made me smile. But then I saw it. At the bottom of the stack was a plain white envelope. It looked innocent enough. But the return address made my blood run cold. State Correctional Facility. Inmate number 89402. It was from Trey. I stared at the envelope. My hand started to tremble just a little. The old anger, the old hurt, flared up in my gut. Even from a concrete cell, he was trying to reach me. He was trying to pull me back into the darkness. Grace walked over, wiping her hands on a towel. She saw my face. She saw the envelope. "Bad news?" she asked softly. "I don't know," I said. "It is from my son." "The one in prison?" she asked. I had told her the basics. I had told her he broke the law and betrayed me, but I had spared her the gruesome details of the poison. "Yes," I said. She sat down next to me. "You don't have to open it, Ike." "I know," I said. I looked at the envelope. I could imagine what was inside. It would be a plea. A carefully crafted letter full of apologies and excuses. He would tell me he found God. He would tell me he was sorry. He would ask for money for the commissary. He would ask for a better lawyer. He would ask me to visit. He would try to manipulate me one last time. I thought about the man I used to be. The man who would have opened it. The man who would have looked for a reason to forgive. The man who desperately wanted a family. Then I looked at Lucky sleeping at my feet. I looked at the RV that was my home. I looked at Grace, looking at me with concern and affection. I had a family. I had a family that chose me just like I chose them. I didn't need the words of a man who tried to sell my life. I didn't need his apologies. His apology should have been saving my life when I was on the floor, not writing a letter after he was caught. I stood up and walked over to the fire pit where the embers of our campfire were still glowing hot. "Ike," Grace said, standing up with me. "Are you sure?" "I am sure," I said. I held the envelope over the heat. The paper started to curl. It turned brown at the edges. "I am not angry anymore," I said, watching the paper smoke. "I am just done." I dropped the letter onto the coals. It caught fire instantly. The flames licked up, wrapping around the white paper, turning it black. I watched the ink disappear. I watched my son's handwriting vanish into smoke and ash. I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel guilty. I felt lighter. It was the final tether snapping. I watched until there was nothing left but gray ash blowing away in the desert wind. "Come on, Grace," I said, turning away from the fire. "Let's go for a walk. Lucky needs to stretch his legs." We walked out into the desert under the vast canopy of stars. I held Grace's hand. Lucky ran ahead of us, chasing shadows in the moonlight. I was 74 years old. I had started over. And as I looked up at the endless sky, I knew that the best years of my life weren't the ones I spent building an empire. They were the ones happening right now. I was Ike Jefferson. I was alive. And I was finally home. We pulled into a small, dusty town outside of Sedona, Arizona, 3 days after I burned the letter from my son. The red rocks rose up around us like cathedral spires built by giants, and the air smelled of sage and heated earth. I had one last piece of business to attend to before I could truly say I was finished with the life I had left behind in Chicago. I parked the RV in front of a small single-story brick building that housed a local notary public and a family lawyer. It was a far cry from the glass and steel towers where Luther operated, but it felt more honest. It felt like the kind of place where a man could make a promise and keep it. Grace sat in the passenger seat, knitting a blanket for Lucky, who was snoring softly on the dashboard in the sun. "Do you want me to come in with you, Ike?" she asked, her knitting needles clicking a soft rhythm. "No," I said, unbuckling my seatbelt. "This is something I have to do alone. It is the final nail in the coffin of the old Ike." She nodded, understanding without needing an explanation. "Take your time," she said. "We aren't in a rush." I walked into the office. The lawyer was a young man, probably no older than 30, with a messy desk and a diploma on the wall that looked brand new. He looked up, surprised to see a man in a three-piece suit, even if it was a bit dusty from the road, walking into his shop. "Can I help you, sir?" he asked, standing up. "I need to draft a will," I said, placing my cane on his desk. "And I need it to be unbreakable." We spent the next 2 hours going over the details. I didn't have the $18 million anymore that was already gone doing good work in the world. But I still had my pension. I still had the future earnings from the investments I had kept separate from the estate. I had the RV. I had my name. I dictated the terms clearly. Upon my death, any remaining assets, any property, any liquid cash was to be liquidated immediately. The proceeds were to be used to establish the Isaiah Jefferson Academy. It wasn't going to be a trust fund for lazy heirs. It was going to be a network of trade schools for underprivileged black children in the inner cities. Schools that would teach them how to build things, how to fix things, how to run logistics, how to be their own bosses. I wanted to give them the tools I had to fight for. I wanted to create 1,000 Ike's men and women who built their empires with sweat and integrity, not with poison and lies. And then we came to the section about my family. The lawyer hesitated, his pen hovering over the paper. "Sir," he said, looking at me over his glasses, "usually we include a nominal bequest for living children, even $1, just to prevent them from contesting the will and claiming you forgot them." "I didn't forget them," I said, my voice hard as iron. "Write this down exactly as I say it." I leaned forward, staring into the young man's eyes. "To my son, Trey Jefferson, and my former wife, Vanessa Lewis, I leave nothing. I leave them the consequences of their actions. I leave them the memory of the father and husband they betrayed. I knowingly and intentionally omit them from this will, not out of oversight, but because they have already taken more from me than money can buy. They took my trust, and they squandered it." The lawyer swallowed hard and typed it out. And for the executor, the lawyer asked, "Who do you want to be in charge of this legacy?" I looked out the window at the RV parked on the street. I saw Grace laughing at something Lucky was doing. She didn't know about my money and she didn't care. She paid for her own burgers. She held my hand when I had nightmares. Grace Miller, I said. And Luther Williams. They will ensure the schools are built. I signed the document. The notary stamped it. The sound of the stamp hitting the paper was the most satisfying sound I had heard since the gavel came down in the courtroom. It was done. My legacy wasn't a biological line of traitors. My legacy was the future I was going to build for children I would never meet. I walked out of the office and into the bright Arizona sun. I felt lighter. The ghost of Trey, the shadow of Vanessa, the phantom of the baby that never existed, they were all gone. They were dust in the wind behind me. I climbed back into the RV. Grace looked up and smiled. All done, she asked. All done, I said, starting the engine. The diesel roared to life, a deep, powerful rumble that vibrated through the floorboards. Where to now, Ike, she asked, putting her knitting away. West, I said, shifting into gear, until we hit the ocean, and then we turn north, or south. It doesn't matter. We drove out of town, leaving the red rocks in the rearview mirror. The road stretched out before us, a ribbon of black asphalt cutting through the desert. I drove with one hand on the wheel and the other resting on Lucky's head. I started to think about the word family. For 74 years, I thought family was blood. I thought it was the people who shared your last name, the people who sat at your dinner table on Thanksgiving. I thought it was an obligation, a duty, a burden you carried no matter how heavy it got. I was wrong. Family isn't blood. Blood is just biology. Blood is just an accident of birth. Family are the people who pick you up when you fall. Family are the people who tell you the truth even when it hurts. Family are the people who love you for your soul, not your wallet. Trey was my blood, but he was my enemy. Vanessa was my wife, but she was my assassin. Grace was a stranger I met in a campground in Utah, but she was my family. Luther was a lawyer I paid by the hour, but he was my brother. Lucky was a dog I bought for $50, but he was my loyal companion. I had spent 40 years building a fortune to protect a son who wanted me dead. I had built a fortress to keep out the world, but I had locked myself in with the monsters. But now the fortress was gone, the money was gone, and I had never been richer. I looked over at Grace. She was singing along to the radio, her voice a little off-key but full of joy. She looked at me and winked. You okay over there, Ike? She asked. You have a look on your face. What look is that? I asked. You look like the cat that ate the canary, she said, laughing. I threw my head back and laughed with her. It was a deep belly laugh that shook my whole body. It felt good. It felt real. I didn't just eat the canary, Grace, I said. I ate the whole damn cage. I pressed down on the accelerator. The RV surged forward, eating up the miles. The sun was beginning to set ahead of us, painting the sky in brilliant streaks of violet and tangerine. It was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. I was 74 years old. I had no house. I had no fortune. I had no heir. But as I drove into that sunset, laughing until tears ran down my face, I knew the truth. I had won. I had beaten the Black Widow. I had outsmarted the con artist. I had survived the ungrateful sun. They were rotting in concrete cells, blaming each other, counting the days of their wasted lives. And I was here, driving a 45-foot house down the highway with a woman who loved me and a dog who thought I was a god. I had won the biggest gamble of my life. I had bet everything on the truth. I had pushed all my chips into the center of the table and called their bluff. And I walked away with the pot. The road ahead was long and I didn't know where it ended. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't driving toward a destination. I was just driving, and that was enough. Blood may make you related, but loyalty makes you family. I spent 40 years building an empire for a son who would have sold my life for a gambling chip. I learned the hard way that blind love is a dangerous weakness. Don't let your history with someone blind you to their present actions. If the people closest to you look at your wallet with more affection than they look at your face, it is time to redefine your circle. Protect your peace, guard your legacy, and never apologize for cutting off the hands that are trying to strangle you. Blood may make you relatives, but only loyalty makes you family. I spent a lifetime building an empire for a son who saw me as nothing more than a payout. I learned the hard way that you cannot buy love, and you certainly cannot fix a broken soul with a checkbook. If the people closest to you are holding a knife behind their back while smiling at your face, do not hesitate to walk away. It is not abandonment, it is survival. Your legacy is not what you leave in a bank account, it is how you live your life after the money is gone. Choose peace over prestige and never apologize for cutting the hand that tries to poison you. Did you like my story? Let me know in the comments if you think I was too hard on Trey or if he got exactly what he deserved. If you enjoyed this journey, please hit the like button and subscribe for more stories of justice and redemption. See you in the next life story.